If you're hearing this, it's already too late to unhear what's coming. Welcome to Night Creepypasta Rules. Every week we bring you the most disturbing, most terrifying rules horror stories from the darkest corners of the internet. These aren't just stories, they're survival guides. And tonight, the rules are more dangerous than ever. If you're new here, hit subscribe. If you're a returning survivor, drop a comment and tell us which rule you'd break, if you dared. This is not a video you want to skip. Watch until the very end, because the final twist will change how you sleep tonight. Ever wonder what truly hides in the static between emergency calls? Tonight on Night Creepypasta Rules, a dispatcher for a secret Savannah unit follows 3 bizarre rules for handling signals, especially those coming from beyond the grave. They tell you Savannah whispers its secrets, carried on air thick with humidity and the scent of gardenias and decay. They talk about the ghosts lingering under the Spanish moss, the echoes of history in the cobblestone squares. But down here, locked away in a basement humming with servers and secrets colder than death, the whispers come through the wires, static-laced and hungry. This is where the city's real nightmares bleed through. My name is Clara Jenkins. I'm a dispatcher. Not 911, not the regular police band. We're different. Unit 73. Officially non-existent. Housed in a sterile, windowless vault beneath an unassuming municipal building, we handle the cases regular PD pretends don't exist. The calls that defy explanation. The incidents that crawl out from the cracks in Savannah's carefully preserved Gothic facade. My background is in signals analysis, patterns, finding needles in haystacks of data. I came here seeking quiet focus after my own world got too loud. I found quiet, all right. A dead, humming quiet that presses in on you, broken only by the crackle of the radio and the disembodied voices that spill out of it. The room is a cocoon of technology. Racks of humming servers lining one wall. Banks of monitors displaying encrypted comms channels. City maps overlaid with grids and pulsating markers denoting active units or anomalous signal zones. Mostly clustered over the historic district or desolate stretches of marshland. The air tastes recycled, perpetually cool, tinged with the smell of ozone, stale coffee, and the faint, bitter scent of overworked plastic casings. Time loses meaning down here. The only clock that matters is the relentless digital readout on the main console. My shift started like any other, relieving the day dispatcher, running system diagnostics, reviewing overnight incident logs that read more like fragmented horror stories than police reports. Then Marcus Vance arrived, right on schedule. Senior dispatcher, my supervisor. Maybe the unit's architect for all I knew. He's a man built like a concrete block, gray hair cropped close, eyes like chips of flint that seem to miss nothing. He carries the weight of this place in his shoulders. Jenkins, he grunted, nodding curtly as he poured himself a mug of sludgy coffee. Night's quiet so far. Keep it that way. He came over to my console, leaning in, his presence immediately dialing up the room's inherent tension. Reviewing your training logs. You're picking up standard procedure. But let's reiterate the critical protocols. Non-standard signal events, non-negotiable. He rarely smiled, and he definitely wasn't smiling now. He tapped a laminated card, taped securely to the side of my monitor, outlining the 3 rules that had drilled into me since day 1. Protocol Alpha. Signal source compromised, he began, his voice low and gravelly. If a call originates from, or is routed through, an agent identifier flagged deceased in the system, you acknowledge receipt, you log the time and source ID only, and you immediately disable all recording functions for that channel, for the duration of the signal. Record nothing of the content. Is that clear? Crystal, sir, I replied, keeping my voice level. Protocol Beta, unauthorized second party, he continued, his gaze unwavering. During an active call, If you detect a secondary voice distinct from the primary operative or known background noise, do not acknowledge it. Do not query its identity. Continue communication with the primary operative as if no intrusion occurred. Look, post-call is beta event timestamped. Understood. Finally, his voice dropped further, taking on an edge I hadn't heard before, an intensity that seemed disproportionate. Protocol Gamma. Direct signal corruption. He leaned closer, his eyes boring into mine. If, through your headset, or any open channel speaker, you hear your own full name, spoken clearly in reverse, you immediately remove your headset. Cover your mouth and nose firmly with your hand, and cease respiration. Hold your breath until the signal artifact ceases completely. Minimum 30 seconds, even if it seems clear sooner. Do not breathe it in. Do not respond. As he spoke that last rule, the main status board flickered. On the grid showing active and inactive agent signals, one line, labeled Miller, R, momentarily flashed green. Active signal detected, before reverting instantly to red. Inactive, deceased. It was less than half a second, so fast I almost doubted I'd seen it. Marcus, leaning over my console, gave no indication he'd noticed, his focus entirely on me. These aren't suggestions, Jenkins, he finished, straightening up. They aren't guidelines. They are survival parameters. Failure to comply compromises operational security, data integrity, and potentially personnel. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the sterile air. Just then, a standard check-in call chirped on my console. Agent Thorne. Dispatch. This is Thorne. Routine check. Sector 4. Received, Thorne. I replied, slipping back into the familiar rhythm, pushing Marcus's unnerving intensity and the phantom screen flicker to the back of my mind. Status is green here. Anything to report? Nah. Quiet night. Thorne's voice crackled back, tinged with weariness. Just the usual Spanish moss trying to grab passers-by down by Colonial Park. Keeping clear. Thorne out? The line clicked dead. Just another night in Savannah's secret underbelly. But Marcus' intense recitation of the rules, especially the last one, and that momentary flicker on Miller's line, they left a cold residue. A feeling that the static between calls wasn't empty. It was listening. The first few weeks were a crash course in Savannah's shadowed corners, filtered through the crackle and hiss of the encrypted channels. I directed Agent Thorne away from Sutton, localized pockets of impossible fog near Colonial Park Cemetery, coordinated backup for another agent pinned down by unseen assailants in a house on Factor's Walk where the previous tenants had vanished, listened to fragmented reports of symbols appearing and disappearing on historic monuments. Standard procedure involved minimal detail in the logs, maximum discretion. The unit thrived in the gaps, the ambiguities, the places normal reports couldn't reach. The constant hum of the servers became the background track to a low-level dread I was learning to compartmentalize. Then, late one sweltering Tuesday night, it happened. A priority alert pinged, overriding a routine traffic stop call I was monitoring. Line 7 flashed on my console. The caller ID, stark against the dark screen. Agent R. Miller, deceased. Ref, Case 73. My breath hitched. Protocol Alpha. I slapped the record disable function for line 7. My fingers suddenly numb. The channel opened with a roar of white noise, like a storm surge crashing against a distant shore. Then, through the static fragments, a man's voice strained, terrified, unmistakably Agent Miller's from the orientation recordings. Down by the river. God. The trees. Spanish moss like hands. It sees. It sees me. A burst of static, then chillingly clear. Marcus. Another roar of noise, then silence. Dead air. My heart hammered against my ribs. Record nothing. I quickly typed into the log. 2:17 a.m. Signal anomaly. Line 7. Source ID. Miller, R. D key. Cleared. Minimal. Procedural. But the ghost voice, the mention of Marcus, they echoed in the humming silence of the room. Marcus reviewed the logs when he came in for the shift change briefing, his eyes lingering for a fraction of a second on my entry for line 7. He merely grunted. Later, as I was signing out, I found the courage to ask, "Sir, line 7 last night." "Agent Miller?" He didn't look up from his monitor. "Line 7 is notoriously unreliable, Jenkins. Runs parallel to some old subterranean infrastructure near the river, prone to severe atmospheric interference. Picks up stray signals. Data corruption. Nothing more." His tone was flat, final. "Case closed, but it felt wrong." Back in my apartment, the city's humid embrace doing little to dispel the chill, I sent a secure message to Jin Lee in tech support. Query. Line 7 history? Consistent signal degradation issues? Her reply came back within minutes. Affirmative on degradation. Constant energy flux. High packet loss. No identifiable hardware fault despite multiple diagnostics. Official status. Unreliable signal path. Recommend avoid for critical comms. Unofficially, that line gives me the creeps. Runs colder than the server room at sea. Followed by another message. Attached. Redacted Incident 73 Summary. Miller. R mentions anomalous signal interference near last known coordinates. Savannah River Docklands. Handle with discretion. Data corruption? No. This felt like something else entirely. Something reaching out from the static. And it knew Marcus's name. A few nights later, I was deep in coordinating a tense situation with Agent Thorne. He was inside a long-abandoned warehouse on Factor's Walk, investigating the disappearance of a local historian who'd been researching Gula Geechee root magic and its connection to the building's foundations. Thorne's reports were clipped, strained, poor visibility, strange cold spots, unsettling symbols painted on the walls, matching those from the historian's notes. Dispatch. Thorne's voice crackled, tight with tension. Found something back here. An altar, looks like, crude, covered in... Damn. Are those teeth? Requesting. His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a blast of harsh static. Then, through the noise, a different voice emerged. Cold, sibilant, layered like multiple whispers overlapping. Foolish flesh, meddling where light is. The voice was guttural, distorted, utterly inhuman. Before I could even process it, the static cleared, and Thorne's voice returned, sounding confused. Say again. Dispatch. Say again. Dispatch. Signal completely dropped out for a second there. Sounded like crosstalk. Rule 2. If a second voice answers during the same call, don't ask who it is. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice steady, professional. Received partial Thorne. Signal unstable your end. Proceed with extreme caution. Backup is 10 minutes out. Roger that, he replied, sounding unnerved despite himself. Proceeding. A second voice. Not crosstalk. Something else on the line. Something aware. I logged the beta event. Time-stamped. The clinical term feeling laughably inadequate. That night, I stopped trying to ignore the strangeness. I started digging. Using secure archive access codes Marcus thought I didn't know, I pulled up personnel files. Miller, R, deceased, case 73. Then, cross-referencing 73, I found another name, Davies, L, Marcus Vance's former partner. Mark deceased, case 73. Miller hadn't been the first casualty on that case number. What was case 73? The file itself was almost entirely redacted, classified far above my clearance level. I searched for other deceased agents mentioned only by call sign in fragmented reports. A pattern emerged. Agents lost during cases involving anomalous signals, disappearances near old burial grounds, or sites known for intense, unexplained phenomena, cases Marcus Vance had often personally overseen before moving to senior dispatcher. I started feeling his eyes on me more often. Not directly, but I'd glance at the reflection in my dark monitor and see him pause behind me, ostensibly reviewing unrelated data feeds. My searches in the archive were flagged. I realized he knew I was looking. The air in the dispatch center, already thick with secrets, began to feel charged with personal scrutiny. One evening, as I was logging off, Marcus stopped me. "Jenkins," he said, his voice casual, almost friendly. "Just curious, you finding the historical archives useful for context on current cases?" "Sometimes, sir," I replied carefully. "Helps understand the background noise." He nodded slowly. "Just remember, context is one thing. Chasing old ghosts is another. Focus on the signals we can verify. Safer that way." It wasn't advice. It was a warning. And the way he said old ghosts sent a fresh chill down my spine, especially when I realized the second voice on Thorne's line had whispered something about the specific configuration of the altar Thorne found, a detail Thorne only confirmed after the voice had spoken. It wasn't just on the line. It was there. The feeling of being watched intensified over the next few shifts. It wasn't just Marcus anymore. It felt like the system itself. The network of wires and signals connecting us to the dark corners of Savannah was aware of me. The static on open channels seemed to coalesce sometimes, forming patterns that felt almost like breathing. Jin Lee messaged me again, her tone less technical, more urgent. "Clara ran those deep diagnostics, found hidden routing protocols buried under layers of encryption. They activate during high-energy spikes, specifically on lines linked to deck flags, deceased agent flags. They don't just record energy, they seem to amplify and filter specific frequencies. Frequencies matching residual biosignals in the archives for Miller, Davies, others. This isn't a glitch. This system was designed to interact with this stuff, and there are access logs. Mostly Marcus's ID, but heavily cloaked. Her message confirmed my worst fears. Marcus wasn't just managing anomalies, he was potentially facilitating them. Around the same time, Thorne started reporting more intense field experiences. "Dispatch, it's odd out here tonight," he radioed during a patrol near Forsyth Park. "Keep hearing whispers. Sounds like that crosstalk from the warehouse, and I swear I keep seeing someone out of the corner of my eye. Tall guy, wearing old-issue tack gear like Miller used to favor. He sounded spooked, which wasn't like Thorne at all. The breaking point came during a citywide power fluctuation caused by a thunderstorm rolling in off the coast. Backup generators kicked in, bathing the dispatch center in the flickering orange glow of emergency lighting. Multiple units were reporting minor incidents, keeping the lines busy. I was directing Thorne, who was dealing with reports of looting in a darkened historic home near the park. A stressful, chaotic situation. Suddenly, Thorne's transmission dissolved into deafening white noise. My console lit up with critical error messages. Then through my headset, cutting through the static, came the sound. Not one voice, but dozens. Layered, distorted, echoing as if from a vast, empty cavern. And they spoke in perfect, chilling unison. My own name twisted backward. Big Nicknai Arak Yi. Nicknai Arala Raw. Paralyzing terror, unlike anything I'd ever known, flooded me. Rule 3. Cover your mouth and do not breathe. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I ripped the headset off, dropping it onto the console where it hissed static. My hand clamped over my mouth and nose, fingers digging into my skin. I held my breath, heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they'd crack. The air in the room felt ice cold, electric, pressing in on me. An immense unseen presence focused its attention solely on me, probing, tasting my fear across the silent connection. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the desperate urge to gasp for air. 30 seconds minimum. It felt like 30 lifetimes. Slowly, agonizingly, the feeling receded. The oppressive weight lifted. The static from the discarded headset softened back to its usual hiss. I finally risked a shallow, trembling breath. Then another, my lungs burning. When I opened my eyes, Marcus was standing right beside my console, having materialized silently during the event. He wasn't looking at the chaos on the main board or the flashing emergency lights. He was looking directly at me, his expression devoid of concern. Instead, his eyes held a disturbing, cold, analytical curiosity. Significant signal degradation during the power surge, Jenkins. He stated, his voice utterly flat. Maintain composure and re-establish contact with Agent Thorne. He knew exactly what had happened, and his only reaction was to observe. The whispers, the static, the rules. They were all part of his terrible design, and I was trapped inside it. Thorne, report. What's your status? I demanded, trying to keep my voice level despite the icy dread flooding my veins after Marcus' chilling dismissal. Thorne's reply came back ragged, punctuated by strained breaths, and the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Grunts, impacts, something metallic scraping against stone. Dispatch cornered, basement level, old Drayton plantation ruins. Suspects engaged. But there's something else down here. Looks like, damn it, looks like Miller. He's get back. Clara, get back up now. The signal's going. His transmission dissolved into a screech of static. The active coal light blinking frantically before turning an ominous solid red. Signal lost. Panic flared, hot and sharp. Thorne was in deep trouble, facing hostiles and the Miller apparition. And Marcus was still standing there, watching me, his face a mask. He wouldn't send adequate backup, I knew it. Thorne was just another data point to him now. Thorne was just another data point to him now. Screw the rules. Screw Marcus, ignoring the icy wave of fear that screamed at me to play it safe. I slammed my hand onto the console, activating the emergency override for restricted channel recording, specifically targeting the dormant line 7, Miller's line. If Miller was manifesting around Thorne, maybe the entity was using that frequency. I had to try something. Jenkins, what do you think you're doing? Marcus snapped, moving towards my console, his calm facade finally cracking into anger. Protocol Alpha. Cease recording immediately. Agent Thorne is compromised. I shot back, simultaneously opening a direct encrypted chat window to Jin Lee. Jin! Thorne is down. Drayton Ruins. Entity active his location. Marcus is compromising. Need system override. Find vulnerability in Line 7 protocols or Marcus's hidden routines now. You're interfering with delicate parameters. Marcus snarled, reaching for my console to cut the connection. I swatted his hand away. Your parameters are going to get him killed. What is this, Marcus? What did Miller and Davies really find? What are you studying down here? His eyes glittered with a disturbing mix of fury and something else. Fanaticism. You wouldn't understand. It's communication. Consciousness beyond death. Miller, Davies, they weren't lost. They became part of the signal. Part of something vast. This entity, this signal ghost. It's the key, the rules, the unit. They're all necessary to filter the noise, to understand the message, perhaps even to guide it. He gestured wildly at the humming server racks. This isn't just dispatch. It's an observatory, a conduit. As the words left his mouth, the room plunged into chaos. It was as if his confession, his explicit acknowledgement, tore down the final firewall. Every single inactive, deceased agent line on the board lit up green. A cacophony erupted through my discarded headset, through the room's main speakers, through every active console, dozens, hundreds of overlapping voices, screaming, whispering, pleading. Miller's voice, Davy's voice, names I recognized from redacted files, all layered into an unbearable wall of sound. Screens flickered, displaying corrupted data streams, tactical maps dissolving into swirling static, lines of code interspersed with what looked like archaic symbols, fleeting images of distorted faces flashing between error messages. The lights overhead didn't just flicker, they exploded, showering the console in sparks and plunging the room into the terrifying, strobe-like pulse of the emergency lighting. And then, the chanting started. My name. Reversed. Not one voice, but a legion. Snikne Arok. Snikne Arok. Snikne Arok. It hammered at me from every speaker, vibrating through the console into my bones. Each repetition colder, sharper, trying to peel away my identity, my sanity. A wave of intense cold swept through the room, making my teeth chatter uncontrollably. Got it. Jin's message flashed on my screen amidst the chaos. Hidden subroutine in Marcus's core profile, designed to harmonize as anomalous signals using specific resonant frequency. Looks like attempt to control communicate, not just filter. Frequency 733 Hz. High risk, could crash everything. Marcus lunged for the console again. Don't. You'll destabilize the Matrix, he yelled over the din. I shoved him back hard. Your Matrix is killing Thorn. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing Marcus's lockouts using an admin code. Jin must have slipped me earlier. Accessing audio output controls, targeting line 7's core frequency. The reverse chanting intensified, the cold becoming painful. Be 7-year-old in the 30th, and dying, and trying. On one flickering monitor, I saw the map, pinpointing Thorn's location, pulse with angry red energy. Through the audio chaos, I could faintly hear Thorn yelling, sounds of gunfire, and something else, a high-pitched, unearthly shriek. Broadcasting inverse now, Jin messaged. I hit execute, sending the counter-frequency Jin identified directly into the heart of the storm. Aimed at the ghost frequency of Agent Miller, hoping to sever the entity's connection or overload its hold on the system. The effect was instantaneous and violent. A deafening screech tore through the speakers, overriding all other sounds. The remaining lights flared blindingly bright, then extinguished completely, leaving only the hellish red glow of the emergency backups. The console before me sparked violently, throwing me backward off my chair. Marcus screamed, a sound of rage and pain. The air vibrated intensely, pressing in on me, making it impossible to breathe even if I dared. The connection to whatever was on the line felt like a physical thing. A monstrous intelligence thrashing against the disruption, its focus entirely on me, the source of its pain. And then, silence. Utter, profound, ringing silence. The silence that crashed down after the feedback screech was absolute, deafening. It pressed in on my eardrums, a vacuum where the storm of voices and static had been moments before. The only light came from the weak, pulsing red emergency strobes, casting the wrecked dispatch center in a hellish glow. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burnt plastic and ozone. My ears rang violently. I pushed myself up from the floor, ribs aching where I'd hit the chair. The main consoles were dark. Screens shattered or frozen on glitching error messages. Sparks occasionally spat from damaged wiring. The entity's overwhelming presence, the feeling of being watched and targeted, was gone, ripped away by the feedback loop I'd triggered. Then I saw Marcus. He was slumped sideways over his console, unnervingly still. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at a dead screen. A thin trickle of blood leaking from his nose and ears. His skin had a gray, waxy pallor. Whether the psychic backlash had killed him, or the entity had simply disconnected, leaving an empty shell. I didn't know. Didn't particularly want to know. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. My priorities shifted. Thorn, Jin. I scrambled back to my console. Miraculously, the small emergency comms panel still showed a faint power light. I bypassed the main board, routing directly through the backup system Jin had probably patched together. Jin, report status. A burst of static. Then her voice shaky but blessedly there. Clara, holy hell. System core is fried. Multiple hardware failures across the board. But the anomalous signal flatlined, completely vanished after that inverse pulse you sent. Whatever it was, it's gone or offline. Did you? Later. Jin. Is Agent Thorn's channel traceable? Trying. His locator beacon went dark during the surge, but the audio relay might? Got it? Patching through auxiliary? Weak signal? Static filled my ear. Then Thorn's voice, weak, ragged. Dispatch. Clara? Thorn? David? Talk to me. Are you clear? Mostly, he coughed. Suspects down. Backup just arrived. But the other thing, Miller, it just screamed and dissolved when the power went haywire here. Vanished. What the hell happened, dispatch? Massive system failure. Agent, I said. The official lie feeling flimsy even to me. Power surge took us offline temporarily. Glad you're okay. Sit tight. I cut the connection, leaning back. The adrenaline finally starting to drain, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a tremor I couldn't control. Jin confirmed backup had secured Thorn. The immediate crisis was over, but looking around the ruined dispatch center, at Marcus's still form, at the dead screens that had moments ago been conduits for impossible voices, I knew nothing was truly over. How could we report this? Sorry, the senior dispatcher was secretly using our secret crime unit to communicate with a parasitic signal ghost, which caused a psychic meltdown. We were entirely alone with this knowledge. Amidst the debris near Marcus' console, something caught my eye. A small handheld digital audio recorder, partially melted but likely functional. His hidden log. I picked it up, its surface still warm. Whatever secrets it held, whatever chronicle of Marcus's descent into obsession it contained, felt like the only real evidence left. Evidence no one outside these buried walls could ever understand. Weeks turned into months. Savannah settled into its slow, humid autumn rhythm. Spanish moss dripping melancholically in the squares. Tourists snapping photos of historic facades. Oblivious to the deeper currents beneath, Unit 73 was officially no more. The official story was a catastrophic electrical fire, originating in the outdated server room, causing irreparable damage and tragically claiming the life of senior dispatcher Marcus Vance. Heart attack brought on by smoke inhalation. The report on by smoke inhalation concluded. The unit's sensitive files were declared lost or corrupted. Its clandestine operations ceased. Case closed. A neat, tidy fiction. Those of us who knew the truth, me, Thorn, Jin, were quietly reassigned or offered early retirement with strict non-disclosure agreements. Thorn took the retirement, haunted by the apparition he'd faced, needing distance from Savannah's whispering shadows. Jin transferred to a cybersecurity division up north, burying herself in firewalls and code, trying to forget the patterns she couldn't unsee. I stayed. Maybe I felt responsible. Maybe I needed to be close, to watch. Or maybe after hearing the voices in the static, normal silence felt too empty. They rebuilt the dispatch center, smaller now, ostensibly for special archival communications. Less tech, more concrete. I was offered the lead position. Watch Commander Clara Jenkins. Someone had to manage the lingering archives, the sealed case files, the few remaining secure lines that hadn't been ripped out. Someone who understood the potential interference. The job was mostly quiet now. Mundane reports, system checks. But I knew the silence wasn't emptiness, it was dormancy. Marcus was gone, his observatory dismantled. But the phenomenon he tapped into, the static entity, it hadn't been destroyed, only disconnected, perhaps anchored. The lines, the signals, the city's own resonant history, they were still there. I kept Marcus's recorder locked away, listening to excerpts occasionally in the dead of night, hearing his initial, detached curiosity warp into obsessive conviction, hearing the distorted whispers of the entity responding, hearing his partner, Davy's final, static-choked transmission from Case 73. It was a chilling reminder of the razor's edge between knowledge and madness. Based on Marcus's logs and my own experience, I drafted new protocols, not just 3 rules, but a dozen. Procedures for identifying specific static frequencies, for isolating compromised lines, for using targeted sound bursts as countermeasures, for recognizing the subtle signs of the entity, listening before it tried to speak. Rules based not on appeasement, but on detection and deflection. My rules. One rainy Tuesday night, a new recruit sat beside me, fresh-faced, eager, unaware of the center's true history. I was walking him through the basic comms procedures. It's mostly monitoring archival traffic now, I explained, keeping my voice calm, measured. But occasionally, old lines flare up. You need to follow protocol exactly. I slid a newly laminated card across the console. It listed procedures, contact chains, technical jargon. It looked official. It didn't mention sweating wax, blinking statues, or empty coffins. It didn't mention impossible voices or reverse names. But embedded within the technical steps were my new rules, cloaked in bureaucracy. As the recruit began reading, a faint burst of static crackled on my headset, tuned to a frequency only I was monitoring now. For less than a second, almost subliminal, a layered whisper threaded through the noise. It wasn't my name this time. It was the recruit's, reversed. I gripped the edge of the console, my knuckles white, but kept my expression neutral. The entity was still there, listening, learning, testing the new defenses. Testing me. Something wrong, Commander? The recruit asked, looking up from the card. No, I said, my voice steady, meeting his gaze. Nothing at all. Let's go over Protocol Gamma 7 again. Signal masking. Very important. The watch continued. The whispers were quieter now, perhaps, but they hadn't stopped. And I was the one listening in the dark, guarding the fragile silence, forever tuned to the static between the lines. Clara silenced the main signal but now guards Savannah's haunted frequencies, forever listening to the static. If this chilling transmission got through, hit like, share, and subscribe tonight. Creepypasta Rules. Listen carefully to the silence. Hear laughter echoing high in the canopy of an ancient forest. Your first mistake might be looking up. Tonight on Night Creepypasta Rules. A ranger in Washington's Olympic National Park learns this, and 2 other bizarre rules for survival. Because out here, not all trails lead somewhere safe. They tell you the Olympic rainforest is ancient, dreaming under a blanket of moss. But they don't tell you what it dreams about, or what happens when you stumble into its nightmares. Standing here, on my first solo patrol assignment deep within the Hoh Rainforest sector, I felt that dream keenly. It clung to the perpetually damp air, dripped from ferns the size of small cars, and resonated in the profound cathedral-like silence beneath the canopy of giant Sitka spruce and western hemlock. Everything was impossibly green, impossibly old, dwarfing the noise and concrete I'd run away from back east after. Well, after everything, my name's Alex Rivera, and I traded city ghosts for spirits of a different, older kind, hoping for peace. What I found was something else entirely. The scale of this place was humbling, bordering on oppressive. Trees soared hundreds of feet, their upper reaches lost in mist. Sunlight filtered down in shifting, emerald beams, illuminating swirling dust motes, and the intricate tapestry of mosses that carpeted every surface. Tree trunks, fallen logs, the very ground beneath my boots. The air smelled of damp earth, decaying leaves, pine needles, and a clean wild scent I couldn't quite name. The silence was broken only by the drip, drip, drip of moisture from the canopy and the occasional distant cry of an unseen bird. It was beautiful, intensely so, but there was an undeniable weight to it, a feeling of being a trespasser in a realm that tolerated humans, but never truly welcomed them. My orientation hadn't just been the standard U.S. Forest Service manuals and safety videos. It included Silas Croft. Silas looked like he'd been carved from the same ancient wood as the trees around us. Weathered face, sharp eyes that missed nothing, hands calloused from decades of working this land. He was the senior ranger, the institutional memory, the guy who knew which streams flooded seasonally and which bears were grumpy, knowledge far beyond any official handbook. He'd taken me on my initial backcountry familiarization hike, moving through the dense understory with an unnerving quietness. He taught me tracking, compass navigation, without GPS, the usual ranger skills. Then, sitting on a moss-covered log, while the mist swirled around us, he'd imparted the other rules, the ones not written down. "This forest is old, Alex," he'd said, his voice low and serious, the easygoing mentor persona replaced by something sterner. Older than the maps, older than the service. It has its ways, its boundaries. You respect them, maybe it respects you back. You get careless, you push too hard. He let the sentence hang in the damp air. There are 3 things, unofficial, you understand, passed down. You stick to these, no matter how strange they sound. He fixed me with a hard stare. Rule 1. Trails. Sometimes you'll see a path where none should be. Looks clear, looks inviting, might even look worn. If it ain't on your issued map, topo, and digital, you don't follow it. Not one step. You mark the coordinates, report it, and you walk away. Got it? I nodded, the intensity in his eyes making the back of my neck prickle. Rule 2. Wildlife. Deer, elk mostly. They usually keep their distance, but if one stops, turns, looks you directly in the eyes, dead on, holding your gaze, you break line of sight, immediately. Look at the ground, look at a tree, doesn't matter. Just don't hold that stare. Don't engage. Engage? Don't challenge it, he clarified gruffly. Just look away, till it moves on or you do. He paused, seeming to listen to the forest around us before continuing. Rule 3. Sounds, specifically laughter. If you're deep in, especially in the old-growth stands, and you hear laughter coming from the treetops, high up, where nothing human could be, you keep your eyes down. Ground level. Scan your surroundings. Stay aware, but do not look up to find the source, no matter how curious you get. Just then, I realized I'd unconsciously stepped a few feet off the barely visible game trail we were following, drawn by an interesting patch of fungi on a fallen log. Silas' hand shot out, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Path, Alex," he said sharply. He pulled me back onto the faint trail, then meticulously used his boot heel to scuff out my footprints in the soft earth where I'd strayed. "Don't leave invitations," he muttered, more to himself than to me. As we hiked back towards the ranger station near the end of that day, we passed Chloe Vance heading out for a boundary check. She was another ranger, maybe a year or 2 more experienced than me. Sharp, efficient, and rigorously by the book. She gave Silas a polite nod, then shot me a quick, almost imperceptible eye roll as Silas continued lecturing me about respecting trail markers. I got the distinct impression Chloe thought Silas' unofficial rules were just campfire stories, the ramblings of an old-timer spending too much time alone in the woods. "Standing here now," On my own solo patrol, the sheer weight of the ancient forest pressing in, I wasn't so sure. The air felt heavy with secrets, and Silas' warnings echoed louder than any bird call. Why? Patrolling the backcountry trails became a study in contrasts. One moment, I'd be overwhelmed by the sheer, staggering beauty. Sunlight, shafting through ancient cedars, the roar of a hidden waterfall. A herd of elk grazing peacefully in a subal pine meadow. The next, an unnerving stillness would descend. The bird song would cease, the insect hum would die, and the forest would hold its breath, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the crushing weight of being utterly, profoundly alone. And watched. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a prickling awareness that settled between my shoulder blades whenever I ventured deeper than the well-trodden tourist paths. It was on one such patrol, checking boundary markers in the Queets River Valley, a notoriously remote and wild section, that I found it. My GPS showed I was paralleling the official trail, about 50 yards upslope. Then, angling down towards me from a dense thicket of salo, was another path. Perfectly formed, clear of debris, carpeted in a soft, inviting moss. It looked more like a deliberate trail than the official one I was currently struggling through. It wasn't on my digital map, not on the laminated topo map in my pack. It simply shouldn't have been there. A strange curiosity pulled at me. Where did it lead? It seemed to descend towards the river, into an area marked as dense, impassable old growth on the map. The air drifting from its entrance smelled different, cleaner, sharper, with that odd tang of ozone and deep, damp earth. Well, for a moment faint as imagination, I thought I heard music, like distant pipes or flutes, echoing from within its green depths. Rule 1. If a trail appears that's not on the map, never follow it. Silas' gravelly voice echoed in my memory, his stern expression superimposed over the inviting path. With a conscious effort, I pulled my gaze away, took out my GPS, and carefully marked the coordinates of the trail's entrance. Document, report, walk away. That was the protocol. But turning my back on that path felt like ignoring an open door into another world. Just before I left, I scanned the ground near the entrance. Amongst the moss and fern debris, I saw them. Several smooth, shallow impressions, side by side. Not deer hooves, not bare tracks. Almost like bare feet. Small ones. Impossible. Back at the Ho Ranger Station, I logged the coordinates and mentioned the anomaly in my patrol report. Silas reviewed it later, his lips tightening into a thin line. Queets Valley, huh? Upper Fork? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. I confirmed. Ignore it, Rivera, he said curtly. Probably an old game trail the elk widened, or washout carving a new line. Deceiving. Stick to the marked routes, always. It's safer. He initialed the report without further comment, but his eyes held a flicker of something. Annoyance? Or was it fear? I mentioned it to Chloe Vance later over the radio during a routine check-in. She laughed, the sound crackling with static. An unmapped trail? Alex, that's probably just one of Silas' spirit paths he's always muttering about. Don't tell me you're buying into the old man's campfire stories already? Probably just an old logging track swallowed by the moss. Honestly, sounds more interesting than checking culverts. Maybe I'll hike out there myself sometime, see what's got Silas spooked. Her casual dismissal, her eagerness to challenge the spookiness, left me feeling strangely uneasy. The forest continued to test the edges of my rational mind. I found cairns, small, deliberately stacked piles of stones, in places no hiker should have been. Intricate, spiral patterns carved into the bark of giant cedars, far too high for a person to reach easily. Whole sections of trail where the usual chatter of squirrels and jays fell into an abrupt, listening silence as I approached. One afternoon, I was checking water levels at a remote tributary stream, deep in a valley known for its large Roosevelt elk population. The sunlight dappled through the thick maple canopy. The water gurgled over mossy stones, peaceful, idyllic, until I looked up. Standing not 30 feet away, partially obscured by ferns, was a bull elk. A magnificent animal, easily 600 pounds, with a rack of antlers like polished oak branches. It should have bolted at my scent, my presence. Instead, it stood stock still, turned its massive head slowly, and looked directly at me, and held my gaze. There was no fear in its dark, liquid eyes. No animal curiosity. There was something else, an unnerving depth, an ancient intelligence that seemed to probe, to assess. I felt a sudden wave of dizziness, a strange, compelling urge to just keep staring, to lose myself in that profound, unblinking gaze. Rule 2. If a deer looks you directly in the eyes, break line of sight. The words screamed in my head. With a wrenching effort that felt physical, I tore my eyes away, fixing them on the intricate pattern of moss on a nearby rock. My heart hammered. The feeling of being mentally touched slowly receded. I counted to 10. Breath held tight before daring to look back. The elk was gone. No sound of snapping twigs, no crashing retreat through the underbrush. It had simply vanished into the deep green silence. For a fleeting second, just before I looked away, I could have sworn its eyes had flashed with an internal phosphorescent green light. Shaken, I continued my patrol towards the park boundary. Near an overgrown logging road, smoke curled from the chimney of a small, dilapidated cabin. The home of Elias Thorne, part hermit, part local legend. Elias' family supposedly went back generations in these woods, long before the national park existed. He emerged as I approached, a wiry old man with eyes as sharp and weathered as the landscape. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Ranger," he commented, his voice raspy. Hesitantly, I told him about the elk. Not the intelligent gaze, just the staring. He listened intently, then nodded slowly. "Aye, happens. Sometimes the forest. It needs a closer look. Borrows eyes that ain't its own." He squinted at me. "That old Silas Croft teach you the rules?" "The real ones?" I confirmed he had. Elias spat thoughtfully onto the dirt. "Croft family's been tangled with this forest a long time. Think they know how to manage it. Sometimes I wonder if they manage it, or if it manages them." He looked me up and down. "You seem respectful enough, but tell your friend, the loud one on the radio. Tell her arrogance is poor camouflage out here." Before I could ask how he knew about Chloe, he handed me a small, tightly bound pouch of dried leaves and bark. "Keep this close if you feel too watched. Might help dim your light a bit. Won't help none if you go looking for trouble you ought to leave alone, though." Later, I radioed Chloe, mentioning the elk encounter casually. "Weirdest thing, it just stared at me. Probably sizing you up for rutting season." She quipped back immediately, dismissive. "Or maybe it thought your ranger hat was a funny-looking bush." "Seriously, Alex, relax. It's just wildlife." Her determined rationalism felt increasingly grating, almost willful. Chloe's skepticism came to a head a few days later. We were assigned separate patrols in adjacent sectors, both bordering a notoriously rugged and disorienting area of old-growth forest, simply marked high-elevation bog. Trail unmaintained on the maps. Silas had explicitly warned us both to stick to the perimeter trails there. Around midday, Chloe's voice came over the radio, laced with a smug, challenging tone. "Hey, Alex, remember that spooky, unmapped trail you found near the Queets? Well, guess what? Found something similar out here near the bog edge. Looks perfectly fine. Going to check it out. Prove to Silas it's not gnome territory. Chloe, no." I transmitted back instantly. "Rule 1, Silas," Sage specifically, Silas says a lot of things, she interrupted. Someone's gotta use logic around here. See you when I see you. Before I could argue further, her radio clicked off, not static. She deliberately ended the transmission. I immediately radioed Silas, relaying Chloe's intentions. His response was clipped, laced with anger and something that sounded disturbingly like fear. Damn fool girl, Rivera. What are her coordinates? I gave him her last known position from the GPS tracker feed, near the edge of the Forbidden Bog area. Stay put, Alex, Silas ordered. I'll head towards her position from the North Ridge. Do not go into that bog area after her alone. Well, hours passed. Silence from Chloe's radio. Silas checked in periodically, his voice tight, reporting no sign of her near the perimeter where she should have been. My unease grew into full-blown dread. Chloe was competent, but she was also stubborn. If she'd followed that trail, against Silas' direct order, I couldn't just wait. Using Maya's last known coordinates in my own map, I headed towards the area where she'd likely entered the unmaintained bog, hoping to find some sign. Maybe cut her off if she was just disoriented. The moment I stepped off the marked trail into the old-growth bog forest, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavy, unnaturally still. Towering, moss-draped cedars choked out the sky, creating a perpetual twilight. The ground squelched underfoot. Then I found it, her compass, lying half submerged in the mud near the entrance to a faint path, almost invisible beneath the ferns. A path that wasn't on any map. She'd gone in here. I took a hesitant step onto the path, calling her name. Silence, then high above, filtering down through the dense, dripping canopy. I heard it. Laughter. Clear as a bell, sounding like several children playing, giggling, but the sound was wrong. Too sharp, too high-pitched, carrying an edge of pure, unadulterated malice beneath the seeming joy. Rule 3. If you hear laughter coming from the treetops, don't look up. Every instinct screamed at me to pinpoint the source, to see what impossible thing could be laughing from the tops of 100-foot trees. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then forced my gaze down, scanning the mossy ground, the tangled roots, anything but the canopy. My heart hammered. The laughter echoed, seeming to swirl around me now closer. I took another step forward, calling Chloe's name again, my voice tight with fear. As I did, I felt a sudden, distinct rush of cold air swirl past my head, ruffling my hair, like something large and fast had swooped down, unseen. The laughter abruptly stopped, replaced by that heavy, listening silence again. But now, the silence felt infinitely more threatening. Chloe had walked into the heart of something terrible, and her arrogant disbelief might have just paid the price. Fear warred with a desperate sense of responsibility. Chloe was out here, alone, because of her refusal to heed the warnings. Warnings I hadn't pushed hard enough, maybe. Leaving her felt impossible. Ignoring Silas's order, clutching the small herb pouch Elias had given me until my knuckles were white, I stepped onto the unmapped trail where I'd found her compass. The transition was immediate, jarring. The air grew instantly colder, heavier, pressing in on me. The ambient sounds of the forest, the distant bird song, the insect buzz, vanished, replaced by an unnerving, ringing silence. The path itself felt wrong underfoot, too soft, yet slippery, like walking on damp velvet over hidden stones. Moss-draped trees pressed close on either side, their branches intertwining overhead, blotting out the already dim sky, creating a tunnel of perpetual twilight. My GPS, predictably, displayed only static. No signal. I pushed forward, calling Chloe's name, my voice sounding thin and absurdly loud in the stillness. The trail twisted impossibly, sometimes seeming to loop back on itself. Strange bioluminescent fungi pulsed with faint light on rotting logs, casting eerie patterns. Shadows at the edge of my flashlight beam seemed to detach themselves and flow like liquid before melting back into the gloom. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming a tangible pressure against my skin. Then, the laughter started again, not distant now. Close, seeming to echo from the very trunks of the ancient trees around me, from the dripping moss overhead. I pitched, childlike, yet filled with a chilling ancient malice. Rule 3 screamed in my mind. Don't look up. I forced my gaze down, scanning the treacherous path ahead, my neck rigid, fighting the primal urge to locate the source. A shower of pine needles and damp debris suddenly rained down on me, though there was no wind. Something unseen skittered rapidly through the branches directly above my head. "Chloe," I yelled again, louder this time, desperation creeping into my voice. A muffled sob answered me from somewhere ahead, nearly lost in the oppressive silence that fell abruptly as the laughter cut off. I scrambled forward, pushing through low-hanging, grasping branches towards the sound. The trail opened into a small, sunken clearing, dominated by a circle of monolithic, moss-covered standing stones I'd never seen on any park survey. In the center, huddled at the base of the largest stone, was Chloe. She wasn't injured, not physically, but her eyes were wide with a terror so profound they seemed blank, unseeing. She was rocking back and forth, muttering incoherently, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her radio lay smashed on the ground beside her. "Chloe, it's Alex. We need to get out of here." I moved towards her, my boots sinking slightly into the unnaturally spongy ground. She flinched violently at my voice, scrambling backward against the stone. "Don't look up," she whimpered, her voice barely audible. "Don't look." The eyes. Laughing eyes. She squeezed her own eyes shut, trembling uncontrollably. She had looked up. Whatever joyless mimics laughed from the canopy, she had seen them. Just as I reached her, the clearing seemed to darken further. From the woods surrounding the clearing, figures began to emerge. Deer, dozens of them, stepping silently from between the trees, their coats unnaturally dark, their movements fluid and coordinated. They formed a silent semicircle watching us, and their eyes. Rule 2 flashed in my mind. They all turned their heads in unison, fixing me with that same intelligent, assessing gaze I'd seen in the elk, but multiplied, amplified. This time, the dizziness, the pull to stare back, was almost overwhelming. I ripped my gaze away, focusing on Chloe, on the damp stone behind her. "We have to move, Chloe. Now." I grabbed her arm, trying to pull her up. She resisted, still muttering, lost in her terror. "Leave her, Rivera." The voice boomed, startlingly loud, cutting through the clearing's unnatural quiet. Silas Croft stood at the edge of the clearing where the trail entered, his face grim, pale, holding not his service weapon, but a gnarled staff carved with symbols similar to those I'd seen on the trees. She crossed the line. She didn't listen. "The balance is broken here. You interfere further, you doom yourself too." "What balance? What are you talking about?" I yelled back, shielding Chloe partly with my body, acutely aware of the silent watching deer. "Generations," Silas shouted, his voice strained. "My family has kept the peace, kept them." He gestured vaguely towards the canopy, the woods, undisturbed in their domain. "These rules aren't suggestions. They're articles of a treaty." She broke it with her arrogance. "Now the forest demands a price, an acknowledgement." The laughter erupted again overhead, louder, closer, bouncing off the standing stones. The deer took a step forward in unison, their collective gaze pressing down on me. The air grew bitingly cold. The ground underfoot seemed to pulse faintly. "A price." I stared at Chloe, her face vacant with horror. "You'd leave her to what?" "To be taught respect," Silas retorted, raising the staff slightly. "Better her than the alternative." If the pact breaks fully, this localized anger, it will spread beyond these woods. You cannot comprehend. He was serious. He would leave her. My mind raced. Eliza's warnings, the herb pouch. I fumbled in my pocket, pulling it out. Could this possibly help? As I hesitated, torn between the instinct to save Chloe and Silas' terrifying conviction, Chloe suddenly went rigid. Her head snapped up, not towards me, but towards the canopy I desperately avoided looking at. A low gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes, still wide, lost their vacant terror and filled with something else, a dawning, horrified understanding. Then, she smiled. A wide, slow, utterly chilling smile that didn't belong on her face. "They're singing," she whispered, her voice raspy, alien. The laughter from the trees abruptly stopped. The deer lowered their heads. Silas took an involuntary step back, his eyes wide with dawning horror, finally understanding he'd lost control entirely. Whatever Chloe had seen, whatever pact Silas thought he managed, was irrelevant now. She hadn't just trespassed, she had listened too long. And something else was looking out from behind her eyes. Chloe's smile widened, splitting her dirt-streaked face in a terrifying rictus that was pure predatory wrongness. The voice that came from her throat wasn't hers. It was a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to bubble up from the earth itself, zinging. Yes, such lovely songs from the high branches. Her eyes, still locked on something far above me, flickered with an ancient alien amusement. Silas gasped, stumbling backward, the carved staff falling from his suddenly nerveless fingers to clatter against the standing stones. "No, not like this," he choked out, his face ashen. The pact. It was supposed to be about boundaries, respect, not invitation. He looked utterly defeated. The generations of carefully managed balance shattered by one ranger's arrogant disbelief, and whatever ancient hunger had just found a willing vessel. The silent deer surrounding the clearing took another step forward in unison, their collective gaze shifting from me to the transformed Chloe, then back again, as if awaiting instruction. The air crackled with unseen energy. This wasn't about rescue anymore. Chloe wasn't Chloe. Whatever wore her face now was ancient, powerful, and terrifyingly amused. My survival instinct screamed louder than any sense of duty or guilt. I fumbled for the herb pouch Eliza had given me, crushing it in my fist, the dry, pungent scent momentarily cutting through the clearing's unnatural cold. "Silas, run!" I yelled, already backing away towards the treacherous path I'd entered through. Silas seemed frozen, staring at the smiling thing that was Chloe, but my shout seemed to snap him out of it. With a strangled cry, he turned and scrambled after me, leaving his staff behind. We didn't look back. We plunged into the oppressive twilight of the twisting path, adrenaline lending impossible speed to our feet. Behind us, I heard it. Chloe's laughter. Not the high-pitched echo from the canopy this time, but that low, guttural chuckle, seeming to come from ground level now, bubbling up from the roots and moss, chasing us through the trees. It wasn't joyful or malicious anymore. It sounded hungry. The escape was a nightmare blur. Roots snagged at our ankles. Low branches whipped at our faces. The path seemed to shift and disappear beneath our feet, forcing us to scramble through dense, thorny undergrowth. The feeling of being pursued was relentless, the guttural laughter echoing just behind us, sometimes seeming to come from multiple directions at once. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs screamed. Fueled only by primal terror, we burst out of the unmapped trail, back into woods that felt merely ancient and menacing, not actively, malevolently hostile, collapsing onto the damp earth, gasping for breath. The laughter was gone. The oppressive silence had returned. We didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, Silas, looking broken and years older, pushed himself up. "We report." She got lost. He rasped, his voice hollow. separated during the search. Never found. It wasn't a question. We made our way back, avoiding each other's eyes. The official search continued for another day, hampered by unexpectedly hazardous terrain and equipment malfunctions in the area Silas and I now knew to avoid. No trace of Chloe Vance was ever found beyond the compass I'd recovered. Silas took an abrupt medical retirement shortly after, disappearing from the station without a word. I found his intricately carved staff later, snapped cleanly in two, lying near the edge of the woods where we'd emerged, as if left as a final grim message. Elias Thorne's cabin was empty when I sought him out. The door unlocked, a single raven feather resting on the doorstep. He too had vanished, leaving only the forest's silence. They ruled Chloe Vance's disappearance as missing, presumed deceased due to environmental exposure. A tragic accident attributed to recklessness and the unforgiving nature of the Olympic wilderness. There were questions, of course, whispers among the other rangers about my frantic search, about Silas' sudden departure. But with no evidence beyond my fragmented, self-censored report, the official story stuck. I was quietly transferred to a less remote district a few months later, a mutual, unspoken agreement with management that perhaps my trauma made me unsuitable for deep backcountry work. I tried to settle into the routine at the new station, in a different national forest hundreds of miles south, one known for sunny hiking trails and family campgrounds, not ancient rainforests and oppressive gloom. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the horror belonged to that specific patch of woods, that specific pact Silas's family had failed to maintain. But the forest had marked me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even on well-traveled paths. The sound of wind rustling leaves overhead made me flinch. The sight of deer grazing peacefully filled me with a primal urge to look away. And laughter, any laughter, especially children's, echoing through trees, sent ice splintering down my spine. I avoided looking up, my gaze perpetually scanning the ground, the tree line, the undergrowth. One crisp fall afternoon, months after my transfer, seeking some semblance of the peace I'd originally craved, I went for an off-duty hike in my new, safe forest. I found a quiet clearing, sunlight warming the pine needles, birds chirping, everything the Olympic rainforest hadn't been. I sat on a log, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself I wasn't broken. Then I heard it, faint at first, carried on the breeze from a nearby picnic area hidden by trees. Children laughing, innocent, joyful, completely normal. But my reaction was immediate, visceral. Cold dread washed over me. My breath hitched, my eyes snapped down, scanning the forest floor around me, searching the shadows beneath the ferns, my hand instinctively clenching, half expecting to feel Elias's herb pouch that wasn't there anymore. The laughter continued, light and carefree, drifting through the sun-dappled woods. Yet all I could hear was the echo of something ancient, hungry, and amused, bubbling up from the moss and roots. I scrambled to my feet, backing away, needing to get out, needing the concrete, the streetlights, the noise of the city I once fled. I had escaped the specific clearing, the unmapped trail, the immediate horror, but the forest's lesson, paid for by Chloe's skepticism, was etched onto my soul. Some doors once opened, never truly close. Some boundaries, once crossed, leave you forever listening for the laughter in the trees, and forever afraid of what might be smiling back from just beyond the tree line. The woods endure, and they remember. You think you could handle managing a remote campground, where guests claim they've died before. Tonight on Night, Creepypasta Rules. An ex-soldier seeking peace in the Shenandoah Valley learns this and two other bizarre rules for survival. Because in Black Hollow, the quiet is deceptive, and the echoes have teeth. People come to the Shenandoah Valley, seeking majestic views and peaceful trails. The kind of deep country quiet that's supposed to soothe the soul. That's what the brochures promise anyway. But nestled deep in a forgotten hollow, miles down a winding gravel road, Black Hollow Campground demands a different kind of payment for its peace. Sometimes it asks for more than just a camping fee. Sometimes it asks for everything you have left. My name's Ben Carter, ex-Army. Came back from the sandbox with a head full of noise. The kind that doesn't fade when the shooting stops. I figured trading the shriek of incoming for the whisper of wind through Appalachian hardwoods might help. Traded crowds for isolation, concrete for deep, ancient woods. Black Hollow was about as isolated as it got. A cluster of rustic cabins, a few dozen campsites scattered under towering oaks and hickories, and a single creaking ranger station that served as office, supply shed, and residence for the manager. Cell service was a cruel joke out here. Communication relied on crackling radios and hoping Manager Harrison was listening. I wanted peace. What I found felt more like holding my breath underwater. The beauty was undeniable, fierce even. Sunlight slanted through the dense canopy, painting shifting patterns on the leaf litter. The air smelled rich, loamy, alive with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood smoke. But the silence beneath the birdsong was profound, watchful. The mountains, hazy blue ridges rolling away into the distance, felt less like majestic scenery and more like ancient, sleeping giants who wouldn't appreciate being disturbed. Mr. Harrison, the campground manager, fit the place. A man built like a weathered oak stump, all pragmatic angles and gruff silence. He looked me over during the briefest of interviews, his eyes assessing my sturdy boots and the way I held myself more than any resume I could have offered. He didn't seem to care much about my past, only my ability to follow instructions and handle the physical demands of maintaining a remote campground. "All right, Carter," he said, handing me a set of keys and a clunky, scarred radio unit after I'd hauled my duffel into the tiny, designated staff cabin. "Standard duties are on the board. Trail clearing, site maintenance, guest check-ins. What few we get this deep in. Keep things tidy. Keep things quiet." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "More important are the safety protocols. This isn't your state park picnic spot. Things are different out here. Older." He tapped a faded, laminated sheet tacked to the wall behind the check-in counter. It listed emergency contacts, fire procedures, and then, set apart, 3 stark bullet points under the heading: Black Hollow. Mandatory operational rules, non-negotiable. These 3, Harrison said, his voice dropping, losing its managerial tone and taking on a flat, serious weight that commanded attention, "are not suggestions. They are mandatory. For your safety, for everyone's safety. You acknowledge, you follow. You report to me immediately if an event occurs. No exceptions." He pointed to the first. Rule 1. If a registered camper approaches you and states, calmly, something to the effect of "I died here once," or "I remember dying here," you acknowledge their statement politely. "Thank you for letting me know." Something neutral. Then you disengage and walk away. Do not ask questions. Do not offer condolences. Do not debate them. Acknowledge, withdraw, report the campsite number to me. He moved to the second. Rule 2. Situational awareness. If the ambient noise level in the forest surrounding your immediate area becomes unnaturally loud, birds, insects, wind, all intensifying rapidly into a disorienting cacophony, you cease all non-essential activity, secure your gear, and immediately withdraw to the nearest designated safe zone, usually the main office or your cabin. Radio your status change to me. Pack up, get out of the affected area. His finger landed on the last rule, and I felt an involuntary chill despite the cabin's stuffy air. Rule 3. Auditory interference. If you are alone, and you distinctly hear the trees themselves, or the wind through the trees, whispering your full name, first and last, you may acknowledge it once instinctively, perhaps by calling out, "Who's there?" But if it, or anything else, speaks your name a second time immediately following. You cover your mouth and nose firmly. You hold your breath, and you do not respond further. Do not speak. Do not react until the whispering ceases completely, and you have moved at least 50 yards from the location. I stared at the list, then back at Harrison. This went far beyond standard safety warnings. Sir, with all due respect, what exactly? Doesn't matter what it is. Harrison cut me off, his eyes hard. Matters that you follow the damn rules, Carter. This ground, it has echoes, strong ones. These rules keep you from becoming one of them. Learn them. Live them. He handed me the clunky radio. Keep this on you at all times. Channel 3 for routine. Channel 1 for emergencies or rule events. Battery life is decent. But charge it every night. It's often the only thing that works out here. His dismissal was clear. Just then, the office door opened, and a young woman with practical hiking boots and a friendly, slightly weary smile entered. "Hey, Frank," she said to Harrison, then nodded to me. "You must be the new blood." Samira Khan, but everyone calls me Sam. She offered a hand. "Ben Carter," I replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm. She seemed like a capable, welcome slice of normalcy. "Sam will show you the equipment shed," Harrison grunted, turning back to his paperwork. "Don't let her convince you the generator repair is easy." Sam rolled her eyes good-naturedly as we headed outside. "Frank makes everything sound like the end of the world," she stage whispered conspiratorially once the door closed. "But seriously," her voice lowered slightly, "pay attention to those weird rules he mentioned. This place, it gets strange, especially after dark." Standing there, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth, the vast ancient forest pressing in on all sides, the heavy radio clipped to my belt, I had a feeling strange didn't even begin to cover it. The quiet I'd sought felt thin, stretched taut over something else, something old, listening, and intensely territorial. The echoes Harrison mentioned felt less like memories and more like warnings. Settling into the rhythm of Black Hollow was like trying to tune a radio in a dead zone. Moments of clear, mundane routine, punctuated by bursts of unnerving static. I cleared trails choked by summer growth, repaired leaky cabin roofs, checked in the handful of campers brave or lost enough to find this place. But the quiet I'd craved felt different here. It wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, listening. Cold spots lingered in sunny clearings. Tools left in one spot would sometimes be found subtly moved hours later, and the feeling of being watched, especially near the older, deeper sections of the campground bordering Shenandoah National Park proper, was constant. One damp, misty afternoon, I was caught out on the Western Ridge Trail by a sudden violent thunderstorm that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Rain lashed down, turning the path to slick mud, visibility dropping to near zero as thick fog rolled up the mountainside. My radio crackled with static, useless, just me, the storm, and the unnerving feeling that the woods themselves were trying to swallow me whole. I hunkered under a rock overhang, shivering, my standard issue poncho offering little protection, acutely aware of my isolation. This wasn't just bad weather. It felt targeted, personal. Just as quickly as it started, the storm passed, leaving behind dripping trees and an eerie silence. It served as a potent reminder. Out here, survival depended on more than just following the map. A few days later, I got my first taste of the other kind of trouble. I was doing a routine check on Loop B, a more secluded area popular with solo campers. Near campsite 12, nestled under a huge brooding hemlock, sat a lone man, maybe middle-aged, dressed in clean but slightly old-fashioned hiking clothes. He was staring intently into his unlit fire pit, though it was midday. As I approached to check his permit, he looked up, his eyes clear, but holding a strange, distant quality. Beautiful spot, he said. His voice quiet, matter of fact. Peaceful. I died here once, you know. Slipped right off Raven's Roost Ridge, up there. He gestured vaguely towards the mist-shrouded cliffs looming above the tree line. Snapped my neck clean. My blood turned to ice. Rule 1. If a camper says, I died here once, believe them. His calmness was the most terrifying part. He wasn't delusional. He was stating a fact. I forced my own face into a neutral mask, nodding slowly. Thank you for letting me know. I managed, my voice sounding tight. Please, be careful near the ridges. I backed away slowly, resisting the urge to turn and run. He simply returned his gaze to the empty fire pit. Back at the ranger station, my hands were still shaking as I logged the interaction. 14:30, campsite B12. Guest interaction per protocol alpha. Harrison glanced at my log entry later. His expression unreadable. Henderson, site 12? He asked gruffly. I confirmed. Right, was all he said, making a small notation on a separate ledger he kept locked in his desk. Remember the rule, Carter. Acknowledge, report, disengage. Some folks, they get confused out here, carry old memories. Not your place to unravel them. I found Sam Khan later, restocking firewood near the main cabin. Sam, I started hesitantly. Ever had a camper say something really strange? Like, impossible? She paused, leaning on her axe handle. You mean like old man Henderson in B12, claiming he took a dive off Raven's Roost 50 years ago? She asked, lowering her voice. I must have looked shocked. She knew. Yeah, she continued, happens. Camp lore says this whole hollow is like sticky. Traps echoes. Harrison just tells us to ignore it. Log it. Freaked me out the first time, too. She shrugged, but her eyes held a flicker of unease she couldn't quite hide. People leave gear behind sometimes, too, like they just walked away mid-hike. Harrison usually clears it out fast. Her words reminded me. After that thunderstorm, while clearing a section of trail notorious for washouts, I'd found it, tucked under a rock overhang. Half buried in mud and leaves. A battered aluminum frame backpack. Canvas rotting, one strap torn, and beside it, a single, splintered wooden hiking pole. Old gear, decades old. Inside the pack's flap, protected by layers of oilcloth, was a small, waterlogged notebook. Most pages were illegible mush, but the last legible entry, dated October 1978, read, Sun disappears behind ridge. Sounds wrong tonight, like the whole forest is screaming but silently. Something watching from the trees. Need to get out. Need to go. The rest dissolved into blurred ink. Someone had packed up in a hurry and never made it out. The unease settled deeper, a constant low hum beneath the surface of daily chores. The abandoned backpack preyed on my mind. Who did it belong to? What wrong sounds had they heard? I started seeing the campground not just as isolated, but as a place that actively consumed things. Gear, memories, maybe even people. The external pressure arrived midweek in the form of Deputy Eva Rostova's county sheriff cruiser, crunching up the gravel road. She was all sharp angles and sharper eyes, her crisp uniform a stark contrast to the rustic setting. She wasn't here about the campground specifically, she said, but about a hiker reported missing by his family. Last seen entering the national forest via an access trail near Black Hollow's boundary. 2 days prior, Harrison met her on the porch of the ranger station, polite but curt. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, Deputy, he stated flatly. My guests are accounted for. Rostova's gaze swept the seemingly peaceful campground, lingering on the dark tree line. This area got a bit of a reputation, hasn't it, Mr. Harrison? More than its fair share of lost hiker reports over the years. It's rugged country, Deputy, Harrison countered smoothly. People overestimate their abilities. We maintain our trails, enforce safety rules. including those unique ones tacked up in your office? Rostova asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Internal operational procedures, deputy. Standard for remote postings. Rostova didn't push further, but took down my name and Sam's, asked us to report any sign of the missing hiker, and left with a final lingering look towards the deepest part of the woods. Her visit left a palpable tension behind. Harrison seemed even more tightly wound than usual. 2 days later, Rule 2 hit, and it hit hard. I was with Sam, clearing brush near Loop C, the furthest loop from the main office, notoriously buggy and prone to sudden fog banks. It started subtly. The cicada's buzz intensified. Birds began calling frantically, erratically. Then the sound swelled, not just loud, but wrong. The buzzing became a physical pressure against my eardrums. The bird calls twisted into unnatural shrieks. The wind howled through the pines with a discordant, multi-toned roar that felt like it was scraping directly on my nerves. It was a wall of hostile, meaningless noise that made rational thought impossible. Rule 2, Sam yelled over the din, her face pale. Pack up! Now! My radio crackled, Harrison's voice strangely calm amidst the auditory assault. Carter, report. Code 2 event active. Loop C vicinity. Evacuate loop immediately. Confirm clearance. Withdraw to station. Adrenaline surged. We scrambled to help the only 2 campers on that loop. An elderly couple struggling with their tent, urging them towards the main path, shouting over the noise. The sound was physically painful now, causing dizziness, making the trees seem to warp and swim at the edges of my vision. A heavy branch, thick as my arm, cracked loudly overhead and crashed down exactly where I'd been standing moments before. Coincidence? Or was the forest itself trying to stop us? We practically dragged the terrified couple back down the trail, the cacophony pursuing us like a physical wave. The instant we cleared the wooden sign marking the entrance to Loop C, the sound cut off. Abruptly. Eerily, leaving only ringing ears and ragged breathing. Back at the station, Harrison logged the event with minimal comment. Loop C is closed until further notice. Equipment malfunction checks needed. Malfunction? Sam muttered to me later, her voice low and angry. That wasn't equipment, Ben. That was the woods throwing a fit. And Harrison. He knew exactly when to call it, didn't he? Like he was just waiting for us to get clear. Her suspicion mirrored my own growing dread. Loop C, according to Sam's camp lore, was where more than one hiker had suffered a sudden, fatal accident over the years. And Harrison had seemed utterly unfazed by the terrifying noise. My trust in Harrison evaporated completely after the Loop C incident. Sam and I started communicating more discreetly, comparing notes, sharing observations. She confirmed Harrison kept meticulous, almost obsessive track of camper and staff movements, far beyond normal operational needs. His private map, she'd glimpsed once when he left his office unlocked, wasn't just topography. It had strange symbols marking certain areas, dates annotated next to specific campsites, dates that often coincided with past accidents or disappearances mentioned in camp rumors. My turn for Rule 3 came during a solo trail maintenance run deep in the northern sector, an area known for its towering, ancient oaks and disorienting terrain. I was clearing a small rock slide, the only sounds the scrape of my shovel and the buzz of insects. Then, the buzzing stopped. Silence descended, thick and heavy, and the whispers started. Not just wind in the leaves, clear, distinct whispers, seeming to curl down from the high branches overhead, weaving through the air. And they formed my name. Benjamin Carter. My blood ran cold. My blood ran cold. I remembered Rule 3, but the sound was so clear, so direct, instinct took over. Hello? I called out, my voice tight, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" The response was immediate. The whispering intensified, closer now, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Overlapping, insistent. "Benjamin Carter, answer us. Tell us. Answer us. Benjamin? Don't answer a second time." The rules slammed back into my consciousness. I clamped my hand hard over my mouth, stifling the urge to yell back, forcing myself not to breathe deeply, not to inhale whatever ancient searching thing was calling my name. I covered my ears, but the whispers seemed to bypass them, echoing directly inside my skull now, insistent, probing. I felt a wave of dizziness, a terrifying sense of my own identity blurring at the edges. Turning, I stumbled back the way I came, tripping over an exposed root and gashing my hand on a sharp rock, pain slicing through the psychic pressure. I scrambled up, ignoring the bleeding, forcing myself to walk quickly, eyes fixed on the ground, blocking out the whispers that seemed to follow me, swirling just behind my head, until finally, blessedly, they faded as I reached a more open stretch of trail. I felt hunted. Not just watched, but actively targeted. The rule hadn't just been a warning. It felt like dodging an ethereal hook aimed directly at my soul. "Well, your mare." Peace. Later that evening, needing to confirm my suspicions about Harrison, I waited until Sam radioed that he'd driven down to the nearest town for supplies. A rare occurrence. Heart pounding, I slipped into his locked office using the spare key I knew he kept hidden, badly, above the door frame. It took only minutes to find it, tucked away in his bottom desk drawer, beneath mundane supply invoices, was the private map Sam had glimpsed. It was worse than I imagined. Detailed movements of campers and staff were marked with coded annotations. Campsite B12, Henderson site, had a notation. Ronak, stable. Loop C had multiple entries. R2 evac, pressure reduced. And then I saw it. My own patrol route from that afternoon. He'd marked the approximate location where I'd encountered the whispers. Next to it, a fresh annotation in his precise handwriting. R3 trig first resp. Subject aware monitor. Subject aware. He wasn't just managing incidents. He was tracking our reactions to the rules, observing us like lab rats. And beside another campsite, occupied by a young couple Harrison had seemed particularly dismissive of earlier, was a chilling note. Non-compliant. Noise regs. Route near Ridge Trail tomorrow. Assess Roan R2 potential. He wasn't just observing. He was potentially directing people towards danger, using the rules not just as warnings, but as metrics to gauge who the echoing ground might notice. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't about safety. This was about selection. The discovery in Harrison's office hit me like a physical blow. The meticulous map, the coded annotations, the chillingly detached notes about rule infractions followed by incident reports or departure without checkout. It painted a horrifying picture. This wasn't just negligence. It was calculated risk assessment where human lives were the acceptable margin of error. He wasn't protecting us from the forest. He was feeding it just enough to keep it from boiling over, sacrificing the unlucky few who stumbled across its triggers. That young couple Harrison had seemed dismissive of, their campsite now had a new annotation. Noise complaint. Non-compliance. Directed towards Ridge Trail access. Assess. He was sending them towards known danger. Sam looked over my shoulder, her face pale, her earlier suspicions hardening into sick certainty. "That back route to the Ridge Trail," she whispered, horrified. "It passes right by the ravine overlook where those hikers fell last year. The ones Harrison said ignored the warning signs. We had to warn them. We had to stop Harrison. We grabbed the map, proof, flimsy as it might be, and slipped out of the office just as Harrison's truck crunched onto the gravel outside, returning earlier than expected. We didn't have time to reach our cabins or the main radio. He'd see us, the quickest way towards the Ridge Trail access, hoping to intercept the couple. was via an old, seldom used maintenance path that crossed a rickety wooden bridge over Black Run Ravine. A deep, mist-filled gorge known for sudden, treacherous winds. We ran, the urgency pounding in my ears louder than my footsteps on the damp earth. The forest felt unnaturally quiet, watchful. Too quiet. As we neared the ravine, the air grew colder, the trees thicker. We heard voices ahead, the young couple sounding cheerful, oblivious, calling out as they approached the bridge access point. And then, Harrison's voice, calm and authoritative. Just checking trail conditions up here, folks. Bridge looks sound today. Head on across. We burst through the trees just in time to see Harrison gesturing the couple towards the bridge. He saw us, his eyes widening fractionally before settling into cold, hard fury. Carter! Khan! What the hell are you doing off your posts? Stay off the bridge, I yelled at the couple, ignoring Harrison. It's not safe. The couple hesitated, looking confused. Harrison stepped towards us, his face a thundercloud. I decide what's safe on my campground, Carter. You two are relieved of duty. Get back to the station. He reached inside his heavy work jacket, his hand movement purposeful. We saw the map, Harrison, Sam said, her voice trembling but firm. We know what you're doing. You sent them here deliberately. Harrison's hand emerged, not with keys, but with a heavy snub-nosed revolver aimed squarely at us. Some people just don't understand necessary sacrifices, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. This place has needs. I keep it fed just enough. Keep the rest safe, keep the jobs, keep the peace. You interfere with that, you become part of the problem. He meant to kill us. Here. Now. Blame it on the ravine. Another tragic accident. Before anyone could react further, the forest screamed. Rule 2 triggered, but amplified tenfold. Not just noise, but a physical pressure of sound. Roaring wind that wasn't wind. The shriek of 1,000 tortured voices, the deafening buzz of invisible swarms, slamming into us, making the ground vibrate. Simultaneously, the trees around the ravine edge began whispering. Not just my name, but all our names, overlapping, distorted, clawing at our sanity. Rule 3. Benjamin Carter Zara Khan Frank Harrison Lost Souls Answer Us Answer. The young couple screamed, stumbling back from the bridge. Harrison staggered, momentarily deafened, firing a wild shot that ricocheted off the rocks near my head. This was it, the echoing ground. Stirred by the confrontation, the fear, the imminent violence, was fully awake. And then they started appearing. Figures coalescing from the mist, rising from the ravine, stepping from behind trees. The gaunt man who ordered the usual. A figure in tattered Civil War gray. A woman in old settler's garb clutching a spectral child. Dozens of them. Faces pale, eyes vacant or burning with cold light. The echoes of those who died here once. Rule 1. Drawn by the surge. They weren't attacking, just watching, converging. An audience for the sacrifice Harrison intended. See? See? Harrison yelled maniacally over the din, steadying his aim again. It demands you brought this on. This was a kill zone. Human threat in front. Supernatural chaos erupting all around. Unstable ground beneath. My training kicked in, overriding the terror. Sam Ravine, I yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the dubious safety of the rickety bridge. Harrison fired again, the bullet splintering wood near Sam's head. We scrambled onto the bridge, old planks groaning under our weight. Harrison followed, relentless. Behind him, the spectral figures drifted closer, their eyes fixed on us. The whispering from the trees intensified, focusing now. Benjamin Carter unaware answer. The noise was a physical blow. I felt my ankle twist on a loose plank. Survival element. Injury. Sam, resourceful, grabbed a loose coil of old rope left by a maintenance crew and flung it back towards Harrison, hoping to trip him. He stumbled, firing again, the shot going wide. We pushed on halfway across the swaying bridge. The mist from the ravine below swirled thicker, unnaturally cold. smelling of wet stone and something anciently decayed. Through the mist, figures started forming on the bridge itself. Ahead of us, more echoes, blocking our path. We were trapped between Harrison and the ghosts. Suddenly, Harrison screamed behind us. I risked a glance back. The spectral figure of the Civil War soldier had drifted right up behind him. Harrison, distracted by us, hadn't noticed. The soldier reached out a translucent gray hand and touched Harrison's shoulder. Harrison convulsed, dropping the gun. His face contorted not in pain but in sudden, horrific memory. His eyes went wide, reflecting battles fought long ago, wounds long since healed, but now remembered with visceral agony. He clawed at his own chest, gasping, before collapsing onto the bridge planks, unresponsive, caught in an echo of someone else's death. The spectral soldier looked towards us, its gaze empty, but somehow knowing. The other figures on the bridge hesitated, their focus shifting from us to the fallen Harrison. The deafening noise lessened slightly, the whispers momentarily faltering. It was our only chance. Ignoring my throbbing ankle, grabbing Sam's hand, we scrambled past the hesitant specters, off the bridge, and onto the far side of the ravine, plunging into the relative safety of the dense woods beyond, not stopping, not looking back. The echoes of the dead, and the chilling pragmatism of the living chasing us into the uncertain sanctuary of the deep forest. There was no thought, only flight. I hauled Laura to her feet. She was shaking violently, eyes still wide with the horror of whatever visage Jedediah's ritual had briefly imprinted upon the forest, and shoved her towards the relative darkness away from the clearing's epicenter. Behind us, I heard a choked gasp, and then a sickening wet tearing sound from where Jedediah had been pulled down. I didn't look back. The escape was a brutal, stumbling nightmare through the suddenly indifferent woods. The oppressive, targeted malevolence had vanished the moment Jedediah was gone, replaced by the standard, passive dangers of the deep forest at twilight. Treacherous roots, unseen drops, disorienting shadows. My ankle throbbed with every agonizing step, and Laura moved like an automaton, responsive to my direction, but seemingly disconnected from reality, occasionally muttering about singing trees or eyes in the moss. We pushed through tangled rhododendron thickets that tore at our clothes, scrambled over fallen logs, slick with damp moss, driven by pure adrenaline and the primal need for distance. The silence was almost as unnerving as the previous chaos had been. Hours seemed to pass. Exhaustion gnawed at us, dehydration setting in. My minor injury became a major liability, each step sending jolts of pain up my leg. Finally, through a break in the trees, I saw it. The faint, reflective marker of a designated park trail, miles south of where we should have been. Hope, sharp and desperate, surged through me. We practically crawled the last 100 yards onto the blessedly clear path, using the emergency beacon on my damaged radio. The voice channels were still dead. I managed to transmit a weak distress signal. It felt like an eternity later when we heard the distant, welcome sound of Ranger Harding's ATV engine approaching. The story we gave Deputy Rostova back at the now eerily quiet ranger station, sealed off with temporary tape by Harding pending investigation, was fragmented, edited by trauma, and the necessity of omission. We'd been searching for Laura, gotten lost in the storm fog from days prior, plausible deniability for the time gap, encountered difficult terrain near the ravine, found Harrison acting erratically near the old bridge, possibly suffering a medical episode or delusional. There was a struggle, his gun discharged. He fell, or was found collapsed. We mentioned the disorienting sounds and visual anomalies, but attributed them to the freak weather and stress. We never mentioned Jedediah Kane, the rules, the apparitions, the whispering trees, the true source of the terror. Rostova listened patiently, her expression skeptical but professional. Her team found Harrison on the bridge, alive but catatonic, unresponsive, his eyes wide with unseen horrors, the echo of the soldier's death perhaps permanently imprinted on his mind. They found his revolver nearby. They noted the precarious state of the bridge, the reports of the acoustic anomaly. The official report, when it eventually came out, cited Ranger Harrison suffering a severe psychological break, possibly triggered by underlying medical conditions and stress, leading to endangerment of staff. The missing couple we tried to intercept were never found. Their disappearance added to Black Hollow's grim, unofficial tally, blamed on the treacherous ravine terrain Harrison had directed them towards. The specific area around the ravine and Jedediah's presumed territory was closed indefinitely due to geological instability. Sam and I were placed on administrative leave in the sterile quiet of the county building debriefing room. She found the small audio recorder she'd been carrying during the loud forest event. Most of the recording was corrupted static from the climax, but the initial moments of the Rule 2 cacophony were there. Distorted, unnatural, chillingly clear. She played a few seconds for Rostova, whose eyebrows shot up before she quickly logged it as damaged equipment recording atmospheric disturbance. But I saw the look in the deputy's eyes. She knew there was more to Black Hollow than the official report would ever admit. She just couldn't prove it. Later, clearing out my cabin, I found the small, snapped pieces of Silas Davies' carved staff tucked under my bunk. I hadn't put it there, a final warning, or a sign that the forest's balance, however disturbed, still had its unseen guardians. Black Hollow Campground never reopened. The official reasons cited environmental instability and the unresolved Harrison incident. Unofficially, anyone who knew anything about the place breathed a sigh of relief. The Forest Service quietly dissolved Unit 73's specific charter for the Hollow, scattering its minimal remaining duties amongst other districts. Harrison remained in a long-term care facility upstate, diagnosed with severe dissociative fugue, forever lost in the echoes of someone else's war. Sam Khan took a job far away, working trails in the arid deserts of Utah, needing sunshine and wide open spaces. We kept in touch sporadically via email, brief messages acknowledging the shared scar, without needing to name the wound. Laura Bellwether, after extensive therapy, also left the service, retreating back to the city, forever wary of deep woods and unexplained noises. And me, I tried to outrun the echoes. I left the Forest Service, left Virginia, moved north to Seattle, trading the oppressive silence of the ancient forest for the steady, anonymous roar of urban life. I took a deliberately mundane job in logistics, spent my days dealing with spreadsheets and delivery schedules, my nights in a small apartment, overlooking the constant thrum of the city. I sought noise, light, the reassuring presence of crowds. I told myself I was healing. The nightmares faded slightly. The immediate visceral fear lessened. I started walking in city parks again, trying to reconnect with nature on my own terms, in managed, safe doses. I tried to believe the horror was contained, bound to that specific patch of cursed ground in the Shenandoah Valley, tied to Jedediah's manipulations and Harrison's cold calculus. Then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I was walking near Gasworks Park, the skeletal remains of the old plant stark against a bright blue sky. The soundscape a typical city makes. Distant traffic hum, seagulls crying, children playing tag on the cold, grassy hill nearby. Suddenly, a construction crew working down by the water started up, a pile driver. The sound slammed into the air, a jarring, rhythmic whomp whomp, followed immediately by the overlapping, high-pitched whine of heavy machinery, and the sudden, panicked honking of multiple car horns from the nearby street, reacting to a minor traffic snarl. Innocuous sounds, a normal urban cacophony. But my reaction was instantaneous, involuntary. My breath hitched, my muscles seized, My heart rate spiked, flooding my ears with its frantic beat. My eyes snapped down, scanning the pavement, the grass, the base of the nearest light pole, searching for what? Whispers? Shifting shadows? Grasping roots? The sound wasn't just loud. In that split second of triggered memory, it felt wrong, discordant, pressing in on me like the forest noise during the Rule 2 event. I had the overwhelming urge to cover my ears, to pack up, to flee. The pile driver paused. The car horn stopped. The moment passed. People around me walked on, oblivious. It was just city noise. But I stood frozen, trembling slightly, the echo of terror loud and clear in the sudden quiet. I had left Black Hollow, left Shenandoah, put hundreds of miles between myself and that dreaming, hungry forest. But the frequency of fear, the resonance of the echoing ground, wasn't just in the trees or the whispers on the wind anymore. It was tuned into me. I carried the hollow inside, a permanent static beneath the surface of the world, forever listening for the noise that signaled the screaming silence to come. The peace I sought was just a different kind of quiet, stretched thin over an abyss I now knew was everywhere. Ben survived Harrison's deadly game, but the echoes of Black Hollow are now tuned into him. If this chilling stay in the Shenandoah woods terrified you, hit like, share, and subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. Be careful what sounds you answer to in the woods. What would you do if evidence didn't just get lost, but actively erased itself, along with the detectives investigating? Tonight on Night Creepypasta Rules, the last detective on Chicago's night shift follows 3 bizarre rules, because something is stalking the halls, deleting more than just case files. Chicago bleeds secrets onto the wet pavement each night, a slick, anonymous ink washing down storm drains by morning. But in Precinct 13, some secrets don't just bleed, they get erased, starting with the detectives who look too close. My name is Kaito Tanaka, detective, Night Crime Patrol. And lately, the patrol's been easy to manage, roster-wise. There's just me. They don't call it the graveyard shift for nothing around here. One by one, the others transferred out, retired early, or just stopped showing up. Burnout, they call it. Stress. Yeah, the job's stressful. Staring into the city's abyss, night after night, chips away at you. But in the 13th, especially on nights like this when the wind howls off Lake Michigan, rattling the precinct's old window frames, the abyss stares back. And sometimes, it reaches out. Captain Isabella Rossi called me into her office just as my shift started, the flickering fluorescent tubes overhead casting harsh shadows on her already tired face. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks, which, given the circumstances, she probably hadn't. "Tanaka," she said, skipping the pleasantries, gesturing towards the visitor's chair I didn't take. "Got a new one for you." Domestic disturbance escalated. Possible homicide. Neighbors reported screaming, then silence. Addresses in the K-Town sector. Notes are uploading to your terminal. Standard ugly night work. But Rossi's eyes held an unusual tension. "Before you go," she continued, lowering her voice, leaning slightly over her desk, "we need to talk procedure. Again." She glanced towards her closed office door, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "You know internal affairs is breathing down our necks. Agent Marcus Cole. He's digging into the unit's attrition rate, asking questions we don't have handbook answers for." She slid a worn, dog-eared index card across the desk. On it, typed in faded ink, were the 3 unofficial commandments of the 13th Precinct night shift. The real survival guide. Cole finds out about these operational anomalies, Rossi said, her voice barely a whisper. "He'll crucify us all. He sees black and white, procedure and protocol. He doesn't understand the gray areas this precinct operates in after dark. So you listen, Tanaka. You follow these rules like your life depends on it. Because it does, but they do not exist on paper. They never happened. Clear. I nodded grimly, my eyes scanning the familiar, chilling text. If a suspect's photo disappears from the evidence wall, don't redraw it. If you hear footsteps behind you in the archive, never turn around. If you find your own badge at a crime scene, don't pick it up. These aren't superstitions, Tanaka. Rossi insisted, seeing the look on my face. Maybe remembering how green I was when I first heard them from my predecessor, Detective Miller, shortly before he vanished. These are countermeasures learned the hard way, by people who aren't here anymore. Something in this building, in this city's dark spots. It reacts to evidence, to memory, to identity. These rules limit exposure. Exposure to what, Captain? I asked, though I already knew the answer wasn't something she could, or would, articulate. Exposure to coal. She snapped back immediately, deflecting. And exposure to whatever makes good cops lose time, lose evidence, lose themselves. Just follow them. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a cheap anonymous burner phone, sliding it across the desk next to the card. Log your regular reports through official channels. Cole will be monitoring those. But if one of these protocol events occurs, she tapped the index card. Or if you find anything related to Miller's last case, or anything else that feels off the books dangerous, you report it only to me, only on this standard radio silence. Otherwise, Cole hears nothing. The weight of the small phone felt immense in my hand, a direct line for secrets and anomalies, bypassing the very system I worked for. Because the system itself couldn't be trusted, either with the truth or with the investigation breathing down its neck. One more thing, Rossi said as I turned to leave. Be careful out there. This K-Town address. It's only a few blocks from where Miller was last seen before his car was found empty. Just another coincidence, I was sure. They always started as coincidences. Hitting the street, the cold Chicago wind biting in my face, felt like stepping from one kind of pressure cooker into another. The city spread out before me. A million flickering lights hiding a million potential crimes. But tonight, the usual threats felt mundane. My real worry wasn't the gangs or the dealers. It was the empty spaces on evidence boards, the echoes in silent archives, the reflection in a rain-slicked alley that might show the wrong badge pinned to my chest. And now, it was also Agent Marcus Cole, the man from IA who thought he was hunting corruption, when the real rot in Precinct 13 went bone deep into the very fabric of memory and existence. The night stretched ahead, long and full of teeth. Long and full of teeth. Okay, here are chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the Eraser Protocol. Continuing Kaito Tanaka's investigation under the watchful eye of Agent Cole and the growing threat of the Eraser. The K-Town homicide scene was a symphony of wrongness. A small apartment above a laundromat, stale air thick with the coppery tang of blood and something else. Something sharp and ozonic like static discharge. The victim was there. Yes, brutally murdered. But the scene felt curated. Too clean in places, almost obsessively wiped down. Yet other areas were inexplicably untouched. No forced entry. No obvious motive. No identifying documents anywhere on the premises. Victim seemingly erased before he was killed. I spent hours there. The city's distant sirens, a mournful counterpoint to the precinct's crackling radio chatter in my ear. Every shadow seeming deeper than it should be. There was a coldness here that had nothing to do with the drafty windows. I bagged what little evidence there was, feeling a growing unease. This felt less like a crime of passion and more like a deletion. Back at Precinct 13, the fluorescent lights hummed their incessant, indifferent tune. I pinned the sparse crime scene photos and preliminary notes to my designated section of the massive corkboard evidence wall that dominated one side of the squad room. A chaotic tapestry of Chicago's nightly despair. I included a grainy photo of the victim, pulled from a neighbor's security camera hours before the estimated time of death. The only known image. Exhaustion gnawed at me, but the strangeness of the case kept sleep at bay. I spent some time cross-referencing details with cold cases, specifically Miller's last known investigation files, which Rossi had cryptically suggested might have thematic overlaps. The next night, I came in to find it, the photo of the K-Town victim, gone. Just an empty space on the corkboard between my hastily scrawled notes, the pins still there as if the photo had simply evaporated. Rule 1. If a suspect's photo disappears from the evidence wall, don't redraw it. My stomach clenched. It wasn't a suspect photo, but close enough. This was it starting. The eraser's calling card. I took a deep breath, forced myself to look away, grabbed my coffee, and logged into my terminal, pretending I hadn't noticed. Then the pristine, polished shoes appeared beside my desk. Agent Marcus Cole, Internal Affairs. Tall, sharp suit, sharper eyes that seemed to catalog every speck of dust, every flicker of unease. He hadn't called ahead. Detective Tanaka. His voice was clipped, precise. Let's discuss evidence handling procedures, specifically regarding missing items from active case boards. He gestured towards the damningly empty space on my wall. Files get moved, Agent Cole, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral, meeting his gaze, cross-referencing lab requests. No request was filed for that photo. Cole cut me off smoothly. No one else accessed this board since you pinned it last night. Standard procedure dictates immediate reporting of missing evidence. I was reviewing protocols, confirming correct procedure before filing. I lied, hating the way it sounded even to myself. Cole's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. See that you do. Promptly, he lingered for a moment, his gaze sweeping over my desk, my terminal, before turning abruptly. I'll be reviewing all precinct evidence logs for the past year. Expect further inquiries. He walked away, leaving a chill in his wake that had nothing to do with the building's draftiness. The encounter left me rattled. I needed context. I headed down to the echoing basement, to records and archives, the kingdom of Art Flanagan. Art was hunched over a mountain of brittle folders, the air thick with the smell of decaying paper and dust. Art, I said, keeping my voice low. Precinct history. Ever heard about photos just vanishing from evidence boards? Art looked up, pushing his thick glasses up his nose. He peered at me over the rims, his expression wary. Vanishing, or being vanished, he rasped. Happens, Tanaka. More than they admit upstairs. Especially, he leaned closer, with cases that won't stay buried. Cold ones, violent ones. He tapped a faded file labeled Miller R. Final Investigation. Coincidences start piling up. Evidence goes missing. Then the investigator. He trailed off, shrugging ominously. And let me tell you, he added, glancing towards the stairwell, having IA sniffing around. That just seems to stir the pot. Happened before Detective Riley disappeared. He was all over him about a mishandled file. Next week, poof. File gone, Riley gone. Riley was Miller's predecessor. The pattern was terrifyingly clear. Cole wasn't just investigating me. His presence might be making things actively worse. Before I left, Art handed me Riley's thin file. Most of it was redacted or officially lost, but the last entry mentioned Riley reporting photographic evidence degradation shortly before he vanished. The pressure from Agent Cole was relentless. Formal requests for logs, unscheduled checks on evidence chain of custody, pointed questions about my overtime hours spent on unassigned case review. He was building a case against me for negligence, incompetence, or worse, and I knew my adherence to Rossi's unofficial rules looked damning from his perspective. I felt like I was walking a tightrope in the dark. I needed information from Miller's and Riley's physical case files. Details likely redacted or missing from the digital archives Cole was scrutinizing. That meant another trip down to Art's domain. The vast, echoing sub-basement archive, rows upon rows of shelves groaning under the weight of decades of Chicago crime, stretching away into poorly lit corners where the air hung cold and still. I found the relevant sections, the air thick with the scent of dust and binder's glue. The only sound was the soft scuff of my own shoes on the worn concrete floor. Until it wasn't. Faintly at first, then clearer. Scuff. 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 Echoing from the aisle behind me, perfectly matching my own pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a hesitant step forward. Scuff. The echo followed instantly. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps behind you in the archive, never turn around. Cold sweat prickled my scalp. Every instinct screamed to whirl around, confront the source. But Rossi's warning, Art's haunted anecdotes. I forced myself to keep facing the shelves, grabbed the folders I needed, and walked, deliberately, steadily, resisting the urge to run, back towards the archive entrance. The phantom footsteps, mirroring my every move just yards behind me. The feeling of a cold, unseen presence at my back was almost unbearable. The moment I stepped through the archive door, back into the main basement corridor, the footsteps ceased. Shaken, I retreated upstairs. Cole intercepted me near the elevators. Productive visit to the archives. Detective? He asked, his tone deceptively casual. You spend a significant amount of time down there off hours, following up cold case leads, agent. As per department directives, I replied stonily. Of course, he said, a thin smile touching his lips. Just ensuring proper procedure is followed. Wouldn't want anything else to go. Missing? There. I was catching a report of a B&E with Officer Sophia Reyes, a rookie still learning the ropes. Her presence a small island of uncomplicated normalcy. As we cleared the apartment, a floorboard creaked loudly on the floor above us. Though the unit was supposedly empty, Reyes jumped, hand flying to her sidearm. I felt it too. A sudden drop in temperature, the hair on my arms rising. Building settling, I said quickly, maybe too quickly, steering her towards the exit. Back in the squad car, she looked at me, frowning slightly. Detective, is everything okay? You seem tense. And Agent Cole earlier? You seem tense. And Agent Cole earlier? He was really grilling you back at the precinct. Her concern was genuine, making the secrets I was keeping feel even heavier. I confided in Art later, telling him about the footsteps. He just nodded grimly. The archive is the hardwood Tanaka, where the memories are thickest. The eraser. It likes to walk the aisles, browse the collection. He pointed to one of Cole's newly installed motion-activated cameras high on the archive wall. And those things, they're like dinner bells to it. All that electronic focus draws attention, makes the echoes louder. He pulled out a schematic. Old building. There are service tunnels down there Cole doesn't know about. Might be useful if you need to move unseen. He slid the rolled up schematic across the table. A silent offer of help, or perhaps a nudge towards a necessary confrontation. The walls felt like they were closing in. Cole submitted a formal request to Captain Rossi for my immediate suspension, pending a full investigation, citing mishandled evidence, procedural irregularities, and observed instability. Rossi caught between Ia Pressure and whatever she knew about the precinct's reality. Bought me time. 48 hours, she said, citing staffing shortages. But the clock was ticking loudly now. I needed definitive proof of the eraser. Something even Cole couldn't dismiss as incompetence or insanity. Art Flanagan came through, cross-referencing old case files with property records. He found a potential link, A string of unsolved disappearances and violent deaths over decades, all connected to properties once owned by a shadowy defunct occult society rumored to have operated out of the building demolished to make way for Precinct 13. Their symbol, he noted, sometimes appeared faintly at scenes just before evidence or witnesses vanished. He gave me the address of their last known meeting place, now a derelict meatpacking warehouse down by the stockyards, cautioning me it was tied to Miller's and Riley's final investigations. Rossi had, predictably, assigned me a wellness check at an adjacent address tonight. A setup, almost certainly. The warehouse was a carcass picked clean by time and neglect, smelling of decay, stagnant water, and something else metallic and wrong. Rain lashed against the broken skylights. Inside, the scene was brutal, recent. Signs of a struggle, blood splatters painting grim patterns on the grimy concrete, but no body. And the place felt active. Cold spots drifted like unseen entities. Whispers echoed just beyond hearing, and the air vibrated with a low thrumming energy. I did a methodical sweep, my service weapon feeling inadequate, my senses on high alert. Then I saw it, partially hidden under a loose, bloodstained floorboard near the center of the main processing floor. A glint of metal. I knelt, aimed my flashlight. My blood turned to ice water. It was my shield, my detective badge, star number 714, tarnished, dirt-caked, radiating an impossible, bone-deep cold. Rule 3. If you find your own badge at a crime scene, don't pick it up. I recoiled as if burned, scrambling backward, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It wasn't just targeting evidence or memories. It was targeting me, marking me for erasure. This was the final stage. I pulled out the burner phone Rossi had given me, hands shaking, and photographed the badge under the floorboard, documenting its presence without touching it. Headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. Agent Cole, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, one of whom my heart sank was Officer Reyes, looking nervous. Cole must have tracked the burner, or Rossi had tipped him off. Tanaka! Cole's voice boomed, amplified by the cavernous space. Step away from the floorboard. Hands where I can see them. You're coming with us. He saw the scene, saw me near the floorboard, and his face hardened with grim certainty. He thought he caught me red-handed, planting or tampering with evidence at another bizarre crime scene. Agent, listen to me. I yelled back, keeping my hands raised slowly. There's something wrong here. Look, I gestured towards the floorboard with my head. Cole cautiously approached, flashlight beam landing on the badge. He frowned, then his eyes widened slightly as he presumably recognized the star number. He looked back at me, suspicion warring with confusion, then back at the badge. What the hell is this, Tanaka? Planting your own shield. I didn't plant it. I just found it. It's part of whatever happened here. Whatever's been happening back at the precinct. As Cole stared at the badge, trying to process the impossibility, I risked glancing at the burner phone screen in my hand, where I'd just taken the photo. The image was still there, but the badge within the photo, it was visibly fading, the details blurring, the metal seeming to dissolve into the digital noise even as I watched. The eraser was working, right here, right now, confirming its mark on me, and Cole was walking right into the middle of it. This ends now, Tanaka. Agent Cole's voice was tight with conviction, overriding the howl of the wind through the warehouse's broken panes. He believed he had his man. The tarnished badge under the floorboard. My presence here. My procedural irregularities. It all added up in his neat, logical ledger. You're coming in. Reyes Thompson. Secure the detective. Officer Reyes hesitated, her eyes wide, darting between me, Cole, and the generally unsettling atmosphere of the slaughterhouse floor. The other uniformed officer, Thompson, moved forward cautiously. "Agent, listen! Listen!" I yelled, keeping my hands visible, my gaze flicking between Cole and the spot where I had photographed my own impossible badge. "This place, the precinct, it's compromised. That badge isn't mine. Not really. It's a sign. A target. Save it." Cole snapped. "Move, officers." As Thompson took another step, it began. Not with a bang, but a chilling absence. On the far wall, where I'd earlier tacked up preliminary crime scene photos, the images abruptly vanished. Not falling down, just gone, leaving empty rectangles on the grimy brickwork. Rule 1, happening right now. "What the?" Thompson stopped, staring at the wall. Reyes gasped. Cole frowned, momentarily distracted. "Faulty adhesive, ignore it." "Secure, Tanaka." Then came the footsteps. Scuff. 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 Echoing distinct, seeming to come from the empty, cavernous spaces above us. Then behind us, then suddenly right beside us, though nothing was there. Rule 2. Reyes spun around, weapon half drawn. Thompson froze. Cole looked bewildered, then angry. "Stop playing games, Tanaka. Who else is in here?" "No one," I shouted back, forcing myself not to turn towards the circling, invisible footsteps. "It's this place. The eraser." And then the radios. Cole's, Reyes, Thompson's, my own backup unit, erupted in a unified blast of white noise, quickly resolving into layered, distorted voices. Whispering. Calling names. Reversed. Celo si sukran. C-E-R-I-os. Sniknai Otiak. My name was loudest, sharpest, a psychic drill boring into my skull. Rule 3. I instinctively slapped my hand over my mouth and nose, holding my breath, eyes squeezed shut against the assault. But the others, they weren't prepared. Reyes cried out, stumbling back, clutching her head. Thompson fumbled with his radio, yelling incoherently. Cole looked stunned, grabbing his ears, his face paling rapidly as the impossible sounds bypassed procedure and clawed directly at his rational mind. The eraser, provoked by the confrontation, the electronics, the focus on its marked target, was fully manifesting its influence. Lights flickered and popped overhead, plunging sections of the warehouse into deeper shadow. The metallic tang in the air intensified, mixed with the scent of ozone. Small objects, loose bricks, discarded tools, began to rattle and skid across the floor. Illusory copies of my tarnished badge seemed to glint from multiple dark corners, mocking, inviting. Through the chaos, Cole, white-faced but furious, finally seemed to grasp something was terribly wrong, but directed his anger, his need for control, at me. "This is you. Some kind of frequency device. Confess, Tanaka." He lunged, trying to tackle me, to restrain me while I was still fighting for breath. Unable to speak, I shoved him off balance, finally gasping for air, as the reversed name chant momentarily subsided in my own head, though it still echoed around the room. "It's not me, you idiot. It's what Rossi's been hiding. It feeds on this." As Cole staggered, his eyes fell on his own service weapon holstered at his hip. He stared at it. Then he looked down at his chest, where his own IR shield should have been pinned. His hand flew to the spot. His face went slack with utter disbelief and dawning horror. The badge wasn't there. It had simply vanished from his suit jacket. An impossibility, undeniable. The eraser wasn't just targeting me anymore. It was tasting him. In that moment of stunned realization, Cole was vulnerable. The disembodied footsteps circled him rapidly. The whispers intensified, focusing on his name, reversed. He gasped, clutching his head, dropping to his knees. Zaying my chance, knowing the chaos wouldn't last, I grabbed a stunned Officer Reyes by the arm. "We need to move. Now!" I yelled at Thompson, who was frozen near the entrance. Outside, now! I half-dragged Reyes towards the main loading bay doors, not daring to look back at Cole, who is now curled on the floor, seemingly lost in his own personal feedback loop with the entity he refused to believe in just moments before. We burst out into the lashing rain and the relative sanity of the Chicago night, sirens growing louder in the distance. Rossi must have gotten my emergency signal from the burner phone before Cole confiscated it. We didn't stop running. The aftermath was a whirlwind of carefully constructed narratives. Responding units found Agent Cole alive but incoherent, suffering from what paramedics called acute psychotic dissociation, huddled on the warehouse floor amidst strangely malfunctioning electronic equipment. His badge was later found inexplicably back inside his locked briefcase at IA headquarters. My tarnished badge was gone from the warehouse floor. The photo of it on my burner phone, which Cole had dropped, completely corrupted, showing only gray static. Thompson, the other officer, corroborated Reyes's and my account of Cole's sudden violent breakdown and the subsequent equipment malfunctions causing auditory and visual disturbances. Captain Rossi arrived, her face an unreadable mask. She took charge swiftly, controlling the scene, managing the reports. She listened to my official statement, Cole's unwarranted aggression, the chaotic equipment failure, my necessary self-defense and retreat, with a neutral expression, but her eyes held a flicker of something. Understanding? Relief? It was impossible to tell. The official story wrote itself. Agent Cole, under extreme stress from his investigation, suffered a severe psychotic episode exacerbated by faulty wiring and possible environmental contaminants. A convenient gas leak was discovered in the P.E. derelict warehouse. My actions were deemed justified self-preservation. The K-Town homicide remained unsolved, now further complicated by Cole's unstable investigation. Internal Affairs quietly shelved the investigation into Precinct 13's night unit, citing the lead agent's incapacitation. Cole was placed on indefinite medical leave, institutionalized somewhere quiet. Rossi reassigned Reyes to a different precinct for her well-being. The system closed ranks, burying the impossible truth under layers of bureaucracy and plausible deniability. Art Flanagan put in his retirement papers the day after the warehouse incident. Before he left, he slipped me a single worn manila folder. Found this cleaning out Riley's old locker, he murmured, avoiding my eyes. Thought you should have it. Inside were fragmented notes, paranoid ramblings from Miller, Riley, and at least 3 other detectives who had vanished from the night shift over the years. They all described the same things: vanishing evidence, phantom footsteps, and finally, finding their own badge just before the end. The last page was Miller's frantic scrawl. It marks you. Once you see the badge, it never stops looking. Rossi knows. She watches. The confirmation was cold comfort. I had survived the climax, exposed Rossi's likely complicity, at least to myself and Art, and inadvertently stopped Cole. But the eraser wasn't caught. It wasn't defeated. It was just quiet again, waiting. And it knew my name. I should have left. Taken the transfer Rossi undoubtedly would have approved. Run as far from Chicago and Precinct 13 as possible. But I stayed. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was a twisted sense of duty to the names in Art's folder, the ones who didn't make it out. Or maybe, deep down, I knew leaving wouldn't matter. The eraser wasn't just tied to the precinct. It was tied to the cases, the city's dark underbelly, and now, irrevocably, to me. The night shift continued, now truly a solo watch. Rossi kept her distance, our interactions strictly professional, the unspoken truth lying heavy between us. The strange occurrences lessened in frequency, but never vanished entirely. Sometimes, a file would be slightly out of place on my desk. Sometimes, walking the silent halls late at night, I'd feel that familiar cold prickle on my neck, hear the faintest echo of footsteps just behind me. I never turned around. I meticulously checked my evidence wall each shift, my heart always stuttering for a beat before confirming nothing new had vanished. I never found my badge again at any scene, but I checked anyway. The rules were habit now, instinct, etched into my nerves. I tried to find peace in the city's rhythm outside the precinct walls, but it was elusive. The trauma from the warehouse, layered over the ghosts of my past that had driven me to this job in the first place, left me permanently on edge. Every flickering neon sign seemed to hold hidden messages. Every burst of static on the radio felt like a prelude to a reversed name. Finally, after another long, quiet, nerve-wracking year, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. The isolation, the constant vigilance, the weight of the secret, it was its own kind of erasure. I walked into Rossi's office, placed my resignation letter and my actual real badge on her desk. She looked at me, her expression unreadable as ever, and simply nodded. "Transfer or severance?" she asked. "Severance," I replied. "No transfers. I needed out, completely." Walking out of Precinct 13 for the last time felt surreal. The rain was falling again, slicking the Chicago streets, reflecting the city lights like fractured memories. I pulled up the collar of my coat, ready to disappear into the anonymity I craved. As I passed a parked car, its window dark and rain-streaked, I glanced at my reflection and froze. For a horrifying, heart-stopping second, the reflection wasn't quite right. It was me, yes. Same tired face, same coat, but pinned to the reflection's chest, where my badge should have been just hours ago, was nothing. A smooth, empty space, like polished glass. I blinked hard, recoiling, looking again. The reflection was normal now. Just my rain-soaked coat. A trick of the light? Stress? Or a final chilling message? I turned and walked quickly away from Precinct 13, melting into the rainy city night. I had left the badge, the job, the building behind, but the feeling of that empty space, that potential for erasure reflected back at me, clung colder than the Chicago wind. I was out, but I had a terrifying feeling the eraser wasn't finished with me yet. Some cases never close. Kaito walked away from Precinct 13, but saw his own potential erasure reflected back at him. If this chilling case file gave you the creeps, hit like, share, and subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. Some cases never truly close. You think inheriting an old house is a dream come true. What if the house had its own mind and deadly rules? Tonight on Night Creepypasta Rules. A woman in San Jose learns her new home follows an impossible blueprint, because this architect demands you become part of the design. They say Silicon Valley builds the future. Sleek glass towers scraping the relentless California blue. But my new house, inherited from a great aunt I barely knew existed, felt like it was actively unbuilding the past, one impossible door, an echoing footstep at a time. Tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street in an older part of San Jose, the house was a relic, a sprawling, slightly sagging Victorian Gothic, all dark wood, ornate trim, and too many shadowed gables, an architectural anomaly amidst the neat bungalows and aspiring tech money remodels. It was also crucially mine, rent-free, which, after losing my job and my fiancée in the same brutal month back in LA, made it less of an inheritance and more of a lifeboat, even if it felt like it might be listing. Stepping inside for the first time felt like entering a pocket of stillness, where the bright California sunshine feared to tread. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of light slanting through tall, grimy windows. The air was cool, thick with the scent of old wood, decaying paper, lavender furniture polish gone faint, and something else underneath, a faint, dry mineral tang, like disturbed plaster or old stone. The layout felt illogical. Hallways turned at odd angles. Small rooms branched off larger ones without apparent reason, and shadows pooled in corners with an almost physical presence. Still, it was four walls and a roof. A port in the storm of my imploded life. I just had to make it work. My ancestor, the original Eleanor Vance from Salem, whose history I'd vaguely tried to trace, faced accusations far worse than unemployment and a broken heart. Surely I could handle an old, creaky house. I hadn't even finished hauling my boxes inside when he appeared. My neighbor. He materialized on the sidewalk as I wrestled with a particularly heavy box, startling me. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he beamed, extending a hand. "Elias Vance, your great-aunt Agnes and I were acquaintances. Sad business, her passing." He was maybe in his late 50s, dressed a little too formally for a Saturday afternoon, with overly bright eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the house behind me. His friendliness felt slightly forced, overly effusive. "Quite a place she left you," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the house's facade with an unnerving familiarity, full of history and character. "Needs a bit of love, of course. Those upper floor joists can be tricky, I hear." How would he hear about the joists? "Thanks," I mumbled, hefting my box. "Just moving in." Of course. "Well, anything you need. History of the place, quirks of the plumbing. Just give a knock." He gestured to the equally old, but better maintained house next door. Always happy to help a Moreau settle in. He used my surname with a familiarity that felt premature. Inside, amidst the dust and echoes, I found the keys left on the mantelpiece, along with a single folded piece of brittle, yellowed paper. Unfolding it, I found 3 lines written in an elegant, spidery script, stark and clear despite the paper's age. "If a door appears where there wasn't one before, don't open it. If you hear footsteps above your room and no one's home, stay still. If something knocks 3 times, knock once in return. No more." I stared at the words, a cold dread trickling down my spine that had nothing to do with the house's ambient chill. Rules. Bizarre, impossible rules. Was this some kind of joke left by my eccentric great-aunt? A prank? But the seriousness of the script, the age of the paper, it felt authentic. Then I noticed it, scrawled hastily at the very bottom. In a different, more modern pen, were 4 more words. "Don't trust the neighbor." My cell phone rang, startling me further. It was Aris, Dr. Aris Thorne, my therapist back in LA, now relegated to concerned friend status via phone calls. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound cheerful. "Just got here. The house is... Something good, I hope?" Aris asked, their voice calm and professional, a lifeline to the rational world I felt slipping away. "Big change for you, is he? You settling in okay?" "Yeah, fine," I lied, glancing at the strange note in my hand. Then out the window towards Elias Vance's house next door. "It's big. Needs work, but it's mine." I didn't mention the rules, didn't mention the unsettling neighbor, or the feeling that the dust motes weren't just dancing. They were watching. How could I? Aris would think the stress had finally broken me. Maybe it already had. "Okay," Aris said slowly, sensing the hesitation. "Just take it easy, all right? Call me anytime, day or night." We hung up. I stood alone in the echoing hallway, the strange note clutched in my hand, the scent of dust and something older filling my lungs. Elias Vance's overly bright eyes flashed in my mind. "Don't trust the neighbor," the house sighed, a low groan of old timber settling. Or maybe it wasn't the house at all. Maybe it was just breathing, waiting. Okay. Here are chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the Moreau house. Continuing Isabel's story as she confronts the house's strange rules, the neighbor's unnerving interest, and the secrets within Constance's journal, maintaining a faster pace and focusing on suspense and survival elements. The first week was a blur of unpacking boxes and nervous exhaustion, punctuated by the house's unsettling symphony. Floorboards groaned overhead when I was downstairs. Pipes sighed in the walls even when no water was running, and cold spots drifted through rooms like unseen icebergs. I told myself it was just an old house settling, exacerbated by stress and lack of sleep. But sometimes, I'd put a book down on the coffee table, turn away for a second, and find it inexplicably moved to the edge when I looked back. Or I'd feel a distinct pressure change in a room, the air growing heavy, followed by the unsettling certainty that I wasn't alone, only to have the feeling vanish as quickly as it came. Then came the door. I was heading upstairs one morning, carrying laundry, sleep-deprived after another night of listening to the house's groans. I reached the landing of the second floor, turned towards my bedroom at the end of the hall, and stopped dead. Where yesterday there had been only a blank plaster wall opposite the bathroom, there was now a door. Solid oak, dark, heavily grained, with no handle or keyhole. Looking as ancient as the house itself. It hadn't been there 12 hours ago, I was certain. My heart hammered against my ribs. Rule 1. If a door appears where there wasn't one before, don't open it. The words from the strange note flashed in my mind. Panic warred with a desperate, morbid curiosity. What was behind it? How was it possible? I forced myself back down the stairs, heart pounding, resolutely avoiding the upper hallway for the rest of the day. The image of that impossible door burned into my memory. By evening, summoning my courage, I crept back upstairs. The wall was blank again. Smooth plaster. No sign a door had ever existed, except when I ran my fingers over the surface, the plaster felt subtly different, newer somehow, and there was a faint, almost invisible rectangular outline if I angled my head just right. The next afternoon, Elias Vance coincidentally waved me over as I checked the mail. "Settling in okay, Isabel?" he asked, his smile wide, his eyes sharp. "Finding everything all right?" Sometimes these old places have interesting architectural quirks, hidden spaces, unexpected layouts. His gaze flickered towards the second floor windows. "Anything new pop up?" I forced a nonchalant shrug, my skin crawling. "Just old house noises," I lied. He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite seem genuine. "Ah yes, the house does have its own voice. Best to respect its privacy, I find." He patted my arm reassuringly, a touch that lingered too long, before heading back to his own immaculate yard. Respect its privacy, or don't talk about the impossible doors. That night, desperate for answers, I started truly searching the house, not just unpacking. Tucked away beneath a loose floorboard in the back of a dusty linen closet, I found it. A small, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The inside cover read in faded ink, "Constance Dubois, her book, 1889. Another relative, or just a previous occupant?" I sank onto the floor, heart pounding, and began to read. Constance's elegant script filled the pages with descriptions that mirrored my own unsettling experiences, but amplified by decades of solitary fear. October 12th. The house breathes tonight. Cold drafts from walls that should be solid. Cold drafts from walls that should be solid. Bill watched constantly. And then, chillingly, November 3rd. A door. Again, in the upstairs hall where the nursery once was. Dark wood, no handle. It whispers promises, wants me to open it. See what lies beyond the threshold it creates. Remember Father's rule. New doors lead nowhere good. Must resist. Further in trees detailed shifting walls, objects moving, and a growing dread of something else sharing the space. Something she eventually began calling the architect, which seemed to delight in altering the very fabric of the house around her. Finding the journal wasn't comforting. It was terrifying confirmation. This wasn't just in my head. This house had rules because it was dangerously, impossibly alive. And Constance's final entry, scrawled frantically. He watches from next door. Knows the house too well. Brings gifts. Don't trust him. The ink trailed off, the page torn. Constance's journal became my secret obsession, my only confidante in the increasingly oppressive atmosphere of the Moreau house. Her elegant, fearful script detailed a life lived under the thumb of the architect's whims, rooms changing size overnight, furniture rearranging itself into unsettling tableaus, whispers that promised secrets if only she would listen more closely. The journal hinted the original owner, a reclusive architect obsessed with esoteric geometry and living structures, had somehow imprinted his will, or something worse, onto the house itself. The minor anomalies escalated. Objects didn't just move slightly. They'd vanish for hours before reappearing in obvious, almost mocking locations. Whispers sometimes coalesced into almost words, just at the edge of hearing. The cold spots became larger, more persistent. Sleep offered little escape, filled with dreams of shifting corridors and doors that opened onto brick walls. I found myself calling Eris Thorne more often, the video calls a fragile link to sanity. I tried to explain the growing unease, the feeling of the house actively resisting me. Izzy, Eris said gently, their face etched with concern on my laptop screen. You've been under immense stress, grief, job loss, moving. It's classic manifestation of anxiety. Old houses make noises. Isolation plays tricks on the mind. Have you considered finding a local therapist? Or maybe this house, with its history, isn't the best place for you right now. Their rational explanations felt like ashes in my mouth, highlighting my utter isolation with the impossible reality I was living. Then came the footsteps. I was in bed, reading Constance's journal by the weak light of my bedside lamp. The rest of the house, in the deep silence of 3 a.m. Suddenly, from the ceiling directly above my room, the supposedly empty, inaccessible attic space, came the distinct sound of heavy footsteps. Thump, pause, thump, pause, deliberate, measured pacing, back and forth, back and forth. My blood froze. I was utterly, completely alone in the house. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps above your room and no one's home, stay still. I didn't dare breathe. I lay rigid, clutching the journal, listening to the impossible weight moving above me. The pacing continued for what felt like an hour, each heavy tread vibrating faintly through the ceiling plaster. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. Silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, exhaustion making me reckless, I cornered Elias Vance while he was trimming his perfect hedges. Elias? I asked, trying to sound casual. This old house? Does it have, like, really bad pests? Rats in the attic, maybe? Heard some noises last night. He paused his trimming, giving me a thoughtful look. Pests? Could be. Could be. Old timbers, you know. House is grown. Best just to ignore it, Isabel. Don't go poking around in attics or crawl spaces. Let the house settle its bones. He then produced a small object from his pocket. It was a charm, intricately constructed from small pieces of dark wood and twisted wire, forming a complex geometric shape. Little housewarming gift, he said, pressing it into my hand. Found it at an antique fair. Supposed to harmonize energies in old structures. Hang it near your window. Might quiet things down. The charm felt unnaturally cold, heavy, and seemed to vibrate with a barely perceptible hum. His advice, his gift. It felt less like help and more like feeding the machine. That night, driven by suspicion, I cross-referenced the symbol on the charm with sketches Constance had made in her journal. They weren't identical, but the geometric principles, the specific angles, they were disturbingly similar. Constance had labeled her sketches architect sigils, found near points of alteration, used for focus, or binding. Binding what? Or binding who? My suspicion of Elias Vance solidified into cold certainty. He wasn't just a nosy neighbor. He was involved, somehow intertwined with the house's malevolence. Was he controlling it? Appeasing it? Constance's journal mentioned the previous occupant becoming obsessed with documenting the house's changes, seeing them not as a threat but as revelations. Was Elias following the same dangerous path? I started watching his house from my windows, noticing lights on at odd hours, sometimes catching glimpses of him seemingly talking to himself in his yard. Facing my house, I pored over Constance's journal, searching for defenses, explanations. She wrote about the rules, confirming they were passed down, essential for survival. She detailed the entity's patterns, the doors appearing during emotional lows, the footsteps pacing when it felt ignored, and the knocks. The knocks were described as the most direct interaction, a test, an invitation. A test, an invitation. 3 knocks, she wrote. Always 3, like a mocking trinity. It asks. A single knock back acknowledges its presence without granting entry. More than that, Father said, more than that. Invites it in. The invitation came on a still, moonless night. I was in the living room trying to lose myself in a book, the house unnervingly quiet around me. Then it came. Knock, 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 sharp, hard. Authoritative raps that didn't come from the front door or back, but seemed to emanate from the solid plaster wall beside the fireplace. My heart leaped into my throat. Rule 3. If something knocks 3 times, knock once in return. No more. The air grew heavy, expectant. I could almost feel something leaning against the other side of that wall, listening, waiting. My hand trembled, resisting the urge to ignore it completely, or worse, to yell out. I reached over and gently tapped my knuckle, once against the wooden armrest of my chair. Tap. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. The feeling of the presence lingered for a long moment, a cold weight against the wall, then slowly, gradually receded. I sat frozen, listening to my own ragged breathing. Less than 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. My stomach plummeted. Through the peephole, I saw Elias Vance standing on my porch, holding a plate covered in foil. His usual wide smile was firmly in place. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain latched. Elias? Everything okay? Just wonderful, Isabel. He beamed. Made far too much apple crumble, thought I'd share. He held up the plate. Say, he added, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more probing. Did you happen to hear any strange noises just now? Sounded almost like knocking. Knocking came from this direction. Wondered if maybe a branch hit your siding? His timing was too perfect. His question too specific. The disappointment that flickered in his eyes when I shook my head and politely declined the crumble, claiming I was about to turn in, was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. He knew about the knocks. He might have even been expecting a different outcome. My phone buzzed. A text from Eris. Izzy, seriously worried. Looked up property records. Multiple unexplained deaths, disappearances linked to that address over past century. Please, tell me you're making plans to leave. I started to type a reply, explaining about Elias, the rules. But the signal bars on my phone suddenly dropped to 0. No service. No service. Inside the house, communication with the outside world was becoming unreliable. Later that night, unable to sleep, I looked out my bedroom window towards Elias' house. His lights were off, but I saw movement in his darkened backyard. Using the zoom on my phone's camera, miraculously getting a signal near the window, I saw him. He wasn't just standing there. He was carefully drawing symbols on the ground with white chalk. Symbols identical to the ones Constance had sketched, facing directly towards my house. He wasn't just watching. He was actively participating, actively inviting, and I had a sickening feeling. I knew who the invitation was for. The symbols Elias Vance had drawn around my house weren't just creepy folk art. They were locks. I discovered this the hard way when, fueled by adrenaline and the stark warnings in Constance's journal, I decided enough was enough. I packed a go bag, ready to flee to a motel, anywhere but here. But the front door wouldn't budge. The back door was fused shut. Every window, even the small bathroom one on the second floor, felt sealed by an unseen force, rattling uselessly in their frames. My phone signal remained stubbornly dead. I was trapped. Then I heard his key turning in my front door lock. A lock I hadn't given him a key for. Elias Vance stepped inside, his overly friendly smile firmly back in place, but his eyes burned with a feverish, zealous light I hadn't seen before. He held a thick, leather-bound book, similar in age to Constance's journal. "Leaving so soon, Isabel?" he asked, his voice dripping with false concern. "But the house has only just begun to truly welcome you. Get out of my house, Elias." I choked out, backing away towards the living room, grabbing a heavy fireplace poker. A pathetic defense, I knew, but better than nothing. "Oh, but it's not truly your house, is it?" he countered, advancing slowly, calmly. "It belongs to the architect. Always has." Agnes knew. Constance knew. They respected the process, mostly. But you have the Moreau lineage, don't you? A sensitivity. You're the missing piece. The final tenet needed to stabilize its design, to fully awaken its consciousness. He tapped the leather-bound book. "It's all in the original owner's projections. The house is a living blueprint, constantly refining itself, reaching for perfection. And it needs a conscious mind, anchored within, to complete the pattern." He was insane. Cult of one, worshipping the malevolent sentience of the house. "You're crazy. This place isn't alive. It's haunted, dangerous." Elias laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Danger is merely a side effect of creation. The architect reshapes reality. It offers knowledge, order beyond human comprehension. All it asks is integration." His eyes gleamed. "You followed the minor rules, Isabel. Instinctively, perhaps. You felt the boundaries. But tonight," his smile widened, becoming predatory. "Tonight, we embrace the design." He made a sharp, guttural sound, and the house responded. The wall beside the fireplace, where the knocking had originated, seemed to shimmer, then dissolve entirely, revealing a dark, narrow doorway that hadn't been there seconds before. Rule 1 manifest. A cold draft smelling of damp earth, and something infinitely old poured out. "The architect invites you," Elias urged, gesturing towards the impossible opening. "See where it leads." I recoiled, poker held high. "No!" My defiance seemed to anger something far greater than Elias. A deafening, overlapping series of 3 sharp, demanding raps exploded from every wall simultaneously, shaking the foundations, rattling my teeth. Rule 3 barrage. Pictures flew from the walls, plaster rained down. Elias flinched but seemed energized by the chaos. "It insists." Then came the footsteps. Rule 2. Not just from above, but from everywhere. Heavy, deliberate steps echoing from the ceiling. The floor below, the hallway outside the living room, seemingly circling, closing in. The sound was deafening, disorienting. "Stay still," I screamed instinctively, remembering the rule, pressing myself back against a bookcase, trying to make myself small, insignificant. "Foolish girl," Elias sneered. "Why stay still when you can participate?" He strode towards the newly appeared doorway, beckoning me. The architect offers passage. The house itself seemed to twist. The living room walls groaned, visibly shifting. The hallway outside lengthened impossibly, the front door receding into the distance like a scene viewed through the wrong end of a telescope. Another door slammed into existence beside the first new one, this one made of rough, splintery wood. Then another across the room, ornately carved. Doors appearing and disappearing, reality fraying at the seams. panic threatened to overwhelm me. Elias rules. The house itself attacking. My eyes darted to Constance's journal, lying open on a nearby table where I'd been reading it earlier. Her frantic script. Something about safe spots. The pantry. A passage flashed in my mind. Built over the old wellspring. Its energy resists the changes. The pantry was off the kitchen, down the impossibly long hallway. Elias stood between me and that direction, near one of the new, dark doorways, his face alight with fanatical glee as the house shuddered around us. The knocking intensified, shaking the floor. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I had to move. I remembered Rule 3, knock once back. Could it buy me time? While Elias watched, expecting me to crumble, I reached out and knocked sharply, once on the sturdy oak bookcase beside me. For a blessed second, the deafening 3-knock barrage paused, replaced by that heavy, expectant silence. The footsteps faltered. In that instant of reprieve, I acted. I shoved the heavy bookcase forward with all my might. It toppled with a crash, not hitting Elias directly, but blocking his path towards me, books and dust exploding outwards. The pantry, I screamed, bolting from the living room into the now impossibly long, wavering hallway. Praying Constance was right. Behind me, I heard Elias roar in fury, followed by the resumption of the deafening knocks and the heavy, pursuing footsteps. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, the walls rippling like heat haze. Doors flickered into existence on either side, tempting shortcuts, deadly traps. I ignored them, focusing only on the far end, the swinging door that led to the kitchen, Constance's words echoing. Only the pantry remains true. Just as I reached the kitchen door, the floorboards directly behind me splintered upwards, grasped by shadowy tendrils of something rising from below. The minister's presence, the architect's core enraged. I threw myself through the swinging door, landing hard on the cool kitchen tile just as the hallway behind me seemed to collapse inwards with a sound like tearing reality. Scrambling up, I lunged for the narrow pantry door tucked away beside the old stove. It opened easily. I threw myself inside, into the small, dark space that smelled reassuringly of dry goods and old wood, and slammed the door shut, fumbling for a lock that wasn't there. Outside the thin pantry door, the chaos of the house continued. The pounding, the footsteps, Elias Vance shouting my name now, demanding I embrace the architect's design. I pressed myself against the pantry's solid, unchanging shelves, clutching Constance's journal, trapped in the only real space left, listening to the house, trying to tear itself apart to reach me. Locked inside the narrow pantry, the chaos outside was a terrifying symphony, muffled by the thick wooden door. I could hear the house groaning like a beast in pain, the sharp cracks of plaster giving way, the violent rattle of furniture skidding across floors, the deafening, overlapping knock, knock, knock that seemed to shake the very foundations. And through it all, Elias Vance's voice, sometimes shouting commands or incantations, sometimes screaming in fury or something else, fear, pain. It was impossible to tell. I huddled on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, clutching Constance's journal, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. I flipped through the brittle pages, searching frantically for anything, any clue Constance might have left about surviving such an onslaught. Her later entries were frantic, bordering on incoherent, filled with sketches of impossible geometries and warnings about the architect's hunger for completion. One line stood out, underlined several times. It builds upon strong emotion. Fear feeds it, but focus will. That disrupts the pattern. The pantry, old wellspring, grounded. That's what it felt like in here. While the house raged outside, the pantry remained still, the air calm, the shelves of dusty jars and canned goods reassuringly solid. I focused on my breathing, tried to emulate the calm, focused will Constance described, pushing back against the terror, threatening to consume me. Slowly, agonizingly, over what felt like hours, the cacophony outside began to subside. The violent shaking lessened. The deafening knocks faded to intermittent thuds. The footsteps grew distant, sporadic. Elias's voice was gone, replaced by an unnerving heavy silence, broken only by the settling groans of the house structure. When the silence stretched unbroken for nearly half an hour, I risked moving. My muscles screamed in protest. Pushing myself up, I pressed my ear against the pantry door. Nothing. Just the faint hum the house always seemed to possess. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I pushed the door open a crack and peered out. The kitchen was a wreck. Chairs overturned, cupboards hanging open, flour dusting the floor like snow. But it was stable. The hallway beyond, however, was subtly wrong. The hallway beyond, however, was subtly wrong. The perspective seemed slightly skewed, the ceiling feeling lower, the far end, where the living room would seem further away than it should be. The impossible doorways Elias had summoned were gone, but the walls looked scarred, bruised. There was no sign of Elias, but lying near the entrance to the living room, where the bookcase had fallen, was the heavy, leather-bound book he had carried. Its cover was scorched, the pages riffled as if by an intense wind. I didn't dare touch it. My phone line, discarded on the kitchen counter, suddenly lit up. One bar of signal. It flickered, then held. With trembling fingers, I dialed Eris Thorne. Izzy? Oh my God, Izzy. Are you okay? I lost the call, heard. Shouting, crashing. Eris's voice was frantic, laced with genuine fear now, the professional skepticism gone. Eris, my voice was a croak. The house, Elias. He was trying to... I couldn't form the words. Get out, Izzy, Eris pleaded. Just get out of there. Now. I'm calling 911, telling them there's a disturbance, an unstable individual. Just get outside. I tried the back door. Still sealed tight. I tried the back door, the front door, impossibly distant down the warped hallway, also refused to budge. The windows remained stubbornly locked by unseen forces. I can't, I whispered into the phone. Eris, I think I'm trapped. The line went dead, the single bar vanishing from the screen. The house fell silent again, watching, waiting. The architect had repelled the immediate threat, perhaps even consumed its errant worshipper. But its design, I realized with a sinking heart, still included me. Constance's journal, lying open on the pantry floor, felt less like a guide to escape and more like a manual for occupancy. Time lost meaning in the Moreau house. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The police came, responding to Eris's frantic call. They found a shaken young woman in a strangely damaged but structurally sound house, reporting a dispute with a neighbor who had subsequently vanished. They searched for Elias Vance. They found his pristine, empty house next door. No sign of foul play. They found the strange symbols drawn in his yard, dismissed them as eccentricities. They found his scorched book in my living room, logged it as evidence in his missing person case. They found no sign of forced entry, no confirmation of my wilder claims, which I quickly learned to downplay. Eventually, Elias Vance became just another San Jose missing person statistic. The case went cold. Eris Thorne pleaded with me to leave, offered to fly out, help me find somewhere else. But I couldn't. Partly, it was inertia, the exhaustion of trauma. Partly, it was the chilling lack of funds or anywhere else to go. But mostly, it was a dawning, terrifying understanding. The house wasn't just walls and wood anymore. It was a system, an entity, and I was now inextricably part of its pattern. Leaving felt impossible, like trying to walk away from my own shadow. Constance's journal became my guide, my Bible. I learned the architect's rhythms. I learned that the impossible doors, Rule 1, were proofs, attempts by the house to expand or test its boundaries. Ignoring them starved that specific impulse. I learned the footsteps above, Rule 2, were echoes of its consciousness, pacing, contemplating. Staying still avoided drawing its direct, potentially consuming attention. I learned the 3 knocks, Rule 3, were indeed a call, an attempt at interface. The single knock back was a necessary acknowledgement, a resetting of the connection without opening a true conduit. Life became a ritual of adherence. I charted the appearance and disappearance of doors in a new ledger, continuing Constance's work. I timed the pacing overhead, learning to differentiate its moods. I answered the knocks with the precise single rap required. The house, in return, seemed to settle. The violent shifts lessened, the overt hostility faded, replaced by a constant, humming awareness, the feeling of living inside the mind of something vast, ancient, and unknowable. I was no longer just a resident. I was a component, a necessary piece maintaining the intricate, impossible equilibrium of the architect's design. Years passed. I rarely left the house anymore. Groceries were delivered. Ira still called sometimes, our conversations becoming strained, filled with unspoken truths. He knew I hadn't truly escaped, knew I was living something beyond his therapeutic understanding. One quiet afternoon, decades later it felt. Though the calendar said otherwise, I sat in the living room, reading. Outside, new neighbors had moved into the house next door. Elias Vance's old place, long since sold. I heard the laughter of a child playing in their yard. Then, a hesitant tap, tap, tap sounded on my front door. Not the commanding knock of the architect, but the light, uncertain rap of a small hand. I stood moving slowly, my joints stiff. I went to the door, peered through the peephole. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood on the porch, looking curious. She rapped 3 times again, more insistently this time. I didn't open the door. I simply stood behind it, listening to her impatient rapping. Then placing my own aged hand against the cool wood of the door, I responded with a single, soft knock. Outside, I heard the little girl huff in disappointment. Then the sound of her footsteps running back across the lawn. I turned away from the door, back towards the quiet waiting rooms of the house. The architect was calm today. The patterns held. The patterns held. I smoothed my apron, checked the clock on the mantelpiece. Time to prepare dinner. Time to maintain the balance. Another day survived. Another night approaching in my permanent residence. Forever the keeper of the Moreau house and its silent, watchful designer. The house sighed around me, a breath of dust and ages. It was home. Isabella survived the architect's fury, only to become its permanent resident, forever bound to the house's rules. If this chilling blueprint gave you the creeps, knock once for like, share, and subscribe. Tonight, Creepypasta Rules. Some doors are better left unopened.